Hello?
Ariel,
Can you hear me?
I can see your forehead.
No, this is Carlos. I'm just trying to fix him up.
Carlos, you got to get a big phone book.
Hey, Harry.
Alderman Rodriguez, do you mind turning on your camera for a second so we can verify that it's you? Ah, excellent. Thank you. Are you guys a co-host yet? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, they are. Okay, I'm gonna hang out, but if you need anything else, let me know.
Okay.
Vice versa.
Who is called in as 744-3840?
That's me. Susan?
Oh, okay. Thanks, Susan.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Alderman Curtis.
Good morning, Terry.
We are live streaming.
We're saying good morning and you all are saying nothing.
Good morning, Terry.
Wanted everyone to know that this is being live streamed right now. So
That's all right.
Hey,
Good morning.
Chairman Austin,
Yes, sir.
you have fixed your background. You look marvelous back there.
Thank you. I got one more little glitch and I'm going to get that today.
Well,
Oh, you got it.
it looks
Yeah.
really,
Got it
really,
going.
it looks really, really nice.
Now I got to get my profile done correctly.
Yeah, that came out great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Sam.
Pick it up. I mean, I really don't, what is the actress name on it?
Well, I pray everyone had a great weekend.
Why isn't my picture coming up?
guys, can you, is that Alderman Gardner that's on as Rita?
There we go.
Busy delivering mass.
Yes, yes. We had, I had 3 sons.
Alderman Gardner, is that you?
Alderman Gardner isn't here yet. He should be here any minute, okay? It's my name, but he is going to be here, not myself, okay? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. I'll put it on,
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning, Chair.
Can everyone hear
Hi,
me good?
everybody.
All right, we're gonna actually get started at about 11:05, just to give everyone an opportunity to sign in, just in case there are some mishaps. And so we'll start at 11:05 today. It's good to see everyone.
Alderman Taliaferro, I hate to interrupt you. I just want to see who's in as Gold Moose.
I'm sorry, say that again, Tiffany.
Someone has joined us as Gold Moose. Okay. That person is us.
Never heard of them.
No, it's a him. Maybe you did hear of him.
Why you get all dressed up, man? You trying to make us look bad?
Oh, yeah, just a little bit.
Are you sure you're not getting appointed to be the police superintendent?
Yeah.
I think I had to dress up just in case, because my pension's on the line.
Are we public yet, or is it just us?
We're public.
Okay,
Can I
don't
ask
want nobody to see me.
Can I ask who's joined us as from a number ending in 23626 and 6223? Six two two three and 3626.
Hello,
Hi, who is this calling from 622?
Edward Burke.
Okay. And who's calling from 3626?
You know, these are some much needed items. This is what things looked like last Thursday when a secret flight from China arrived at O'Hare with 2 dozen pallets of
Tiffany?
Yes, Alderman.
Will you, at the onset of the meeting, will you unmute everyone? Or it's going to be an individual function?
We can unmute everyone at the beginning of the meeting. That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Just checking again, who's calling from 3626?
Hey, Tiff, are you working on something?
Just working on getting the meeting going. What's up?
Well, as you know, this is really me, not Daniel Martin on here, so I can't get Daniel Martin off of there and say Nick Sposato.
I will update it right now.
Thank you.
I'm not on this committee, right?
No, but you're an honorary member, Walter.
I know you keep trying to put me on the committee, man.
Walter, I think you've been to every one of our meetings so far.
I need to take my attendance from your meeting and put them on the meetings that I didn't go to.
We got you covered.
10 committees aren't enough, Walter? You want to be on 11 of them?
You know, you forget, I used to be on this committee. And that's why, you know, it's a habit, that's all.
Okay, guys, we're gonna get started. I don't have a gavel, so I am virtually gaveling in. The meeting of the Committee on Public Safety is called to order. Pursuant to Illinois Executive Order 2020-07, issued on March 16, 2020, suspended provisions of the Open Meetings Act and encouraging remote participation. This meeting is conducted by video conference. We have one item on the agenda this morning, which is the proposed appointment of David O. Brown, or Mr. David O. Brown, as the City of Chicago Superintendent of Police. We will start our meeting this morning with a roll call, beginning with Vice Chairman Osterman. Well, before we do that, if all aldermen can and committee members can unmute their mics.
Osterman is present.
Alderman Sawyer.
Here.
Alderman Mitchell. Alderman Mitchell. Alderman Thompson.
Here.
Alderman Lopez.
Here.
Alderman Curtis.
Here.
Alderman Scott.
Present.
Alderman Ervin.
I'm surprised it changed.
Alderman Ervin.
Oh, maybe because it's not your Zoom.
I do see Alderman Ervin. Alderman Ervin, if you can unmute yourself, or Tiffany, we can unmute Alderman
I
Ervin.
need to get your Zoom profile. That's what it is, Jim.
Okay.
Alderman Boyes.
Yeah. Alderman Ervin is here.
Alderman Reboyes.
Here.
Alderman Mitz.
Here.
Alderman Sposato.
Here.
Alderman Nugent.
Here.
Alderman Napolitano.
Napolitano's here.
Alderman Napolitano's here. Alderman Smith.
Here.
Alderman Tunney.
Here.
Alderman Gardner.
Here, yes. Can you hear me? There's some visual or there's some audio issues. Hello, can you hear me?
Alderman Silverstein.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Alderman Martin's present. Alderman Silverstein is present. Alderman Martin's present.
Chairman, this is Alderman Ervin. Did you get my voice?
Did you want to, oh, I'm sorry, they could see me. Did you want to hit Alt A?
I did get you, Alderman Ervin.
Did you get me? Did you get Alderman Gardner?
We have 17 members present.
Where's Alt? Alt A.
Chairman. Alderman Harris.
Alderman Gardner, we have 18 members present. We have a quorum, probably expected a little bit because.
Alderman, you're not gonna call the non-members?
Have to call the non-members also.
Yeah.
This is our very first committee meeting. I'll continue.
Hey, Chairman Taliaferro, Alderman Mitchell's on.
Yeah, and are you calling the non-members?
It looked like people may be able to see the non-members.
Yes, they can.
Yes.
Tiffany?
Yes.
Okay, for some reason, I just got kicked out.
Yeah, I think your internet connection is having issues. If you have an Ethernet cable that you can connect to your router or your cable modem.
Okay, I'll work on that, and I'll work up on setting up a secondary source. What we do, as I stated before, we do have we have 18 members present. We do have a quorum. But
Chairman Taliaferro, did you get me in the meeting? Did you?
I did. I
All
did
right,
give
good.
you Alderman Martin.
No, that's Gardner.
Oh,
Dowell, non-member here. Alderman here is non-member here.
okay, I do.
A non-member.
I do have the non-members present as well. As I see you on the side, I do mark you present, and as I see your face on the screen, I mark you present as well.
Great.
But for purposes of committee, I'm only calling roll call with committee members. Let me start again. Let me thank everyone for being here, and especially thank Acting Superintendent Brown for being with us this morning. I look forward to the day, and I look forward to our council members really getting an opportunity to question and comments regarding your appointment. But as I said before, we have any issues with regard to any difficulties electronically and technically, bear with us on this. This is our first shot at it. So we will begin our public comment section at this time. I believe we do have one public speaker that has been signed up. For that particular speaker, we'll be limited to 3 minutes speaking. And if we can start the public comment at this time.
The public speaker is not on the line, Chairman.
Okay. That concludes our period of public speaking. As stated earlier, we do have one item on the agenda this morning, the proposed appointment of David O. Brown as Superintendent of Police. Mr. Brown is present to testify on this appointment. Each of you should have received information from my staff regarding a bio for Mr. Brown and an opening statement. Mr. Brown, if you could please join us and provide us with your opening statement this morning. Is Superintendent Brown, can you hear us?
Got to unmute. It's on mute.
Good morning.
Good morning, Superintendent.
I want to thank the alderman here and the Public Safety Committee. I want to begin by thanking Mayor Lori Lightfoot and the Chicago Police Board for this tremendous opportunity. And I look forward to answering your questions today. I also look forward to meeting each of you and spending time in all 50 wards throughout the city. Chicago is a special place, and I'm so excited about the opportunity to serve this great city. I spent most of my life in Dallas up until now, and I've worked as a police officer for 33 years, working my way up the ranks. While many people may think of Dallas like the 1980s TV show J.R. Ewing and cattle ranches and 10-gallon hats and oil fields, I grew up in a neighborhood that looked more like Chicago's West and South Side. This is where I developed my passion for urban policing and city life. I know the joys of living surrounded by others. I also know the struggles of growing up poor, living and working in a historically segregated city, as Dallas and Chicago share these difficult past and present. I came to Chicago for a new experience and new challenges. I arrived with my wife of 25 years, Sidonia, and our teenage daughter. I want to know this city, and I want the city to get to know me. I want to feel its heartbeat and vibrancy, and also its challenges and struggles. I want to experience what it means to be a true Chicagoan. I am committed to making the Chicago Police Department a department Chicagoans deserve and is proud to call its own. I am committed to constitutional policing that respects all residents, especially in the most challenging areas of the city. I believe in the value of diversity's contribution to excellence as a reflection of the ideals of our great democracy. If confirmed, the Chicago Police Department will utilize the consent decree as a minimal standard for policing excellence, with the goal of an even higher standard of respect for all who live, work, and play in this great city. I will develop strong relationships with residents and police officers with an emphasis on young people and their families. I believe we are only limited in our community policing efforts by our innovation and creativity. I will develop and identify community policing savants to push, pull, and if necessary, drag the police department to a community policing oriented culture that yields outcomes that makes us all safer. I will be relentless in our efforts to reduce violent crimes, especially murders and shootings, utilizing street outreach while activating best practices programs and trying new innovative solutions as well. I care about cops, not just the physical, but also their emotional well-being. While we can't undo the many horrible and tragic circumstances they experience on a daily basis, we can acknowledge that it's okay to say, I need to talk to someone. We can create a normalcy that removes the stigma many face in seeking out help when they are overwhelmed by the challenges of the job. We can implement an awareness campaign in collaboration with mental health professionals and officers' families to ensure our officers' careers are healthy ones, both physically and emotionally. If given the chance to serve this great city, I will endeavor to be a good steward of the taxpayers' dollars budgeted by the mayor and this council to the Chicago Police Department. If given the chance to serve this great city, I will ensure the work done by Chief Charlie Beck endures and is expanded to fully embrace police reform with the goal of making the Chicago Police Department the best police department in the country and the city of Chicago the safest city in the country. I want to acknowledge the extraordinary response by Chicago Police, Chicago Fire, and Chicago Public Health to the COVID-19 pandemic. We are also working to ensure Chicagoans enjoy a safe summer with our extensive summer safety planning. In closing, I want to again thank Mayor Lori Lightfoot for her confidence in me, and I want to thank you all for your commitment to your neighborhoods and to this great city. I'll take your questions.
Thank you, Acting Superintendent Brown. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today. And as Chairman of Public Safety and as I speak for my colleagues, we do look forward to getting to know you very well over the next several years. For my committee members and council members, as an order of business today, if you have any points of order, points of information or clarification, if you could please use the raise your hand function on the right-hand side, and we will we will call upon you as soon as we can recognize. Again, so that this can transition as smoothly as possible, any points of order, points of information, and points of clarification, use the raise your hand function. For questions and comments, I will begin with committee members in order of wards, with Vice Chairman Osterman being the first that I call upon, and then the 6th Ward, Alderman Sawyer. And we will go in order from there. Once all questions and comments have been asked by committee members, I would then entertain, with the superintendent, would then entertain questions and comments from non-committee members based on the order that I do see you raise your hand. If there are any questions before we begin the question and comment period of this committee meeting, you could use the raise your hand function as well, and we'll call on you. I do see Vice Chairman Osterman's hand being raised. Vice Chairman Osterman, do you have any questions?
In the interest of time, I'll ask if I can ask 2 questions, and I think I've given Interim Superintendent Brown some other questions that if he can get back to me, I'd appreciate. And I have a feeling that other members of the committee and council will be asking. Interim Superintendent, I want to first appreciate your willingness to take on the challenge of being the Superintendent of Chicago Police at a very critical time in our city, especially with the crisis. The men and women of CPD are doing a phenomenal job. And we have safety issues long-term that we have to get at. So the 2 questions I have, and I'll defer to my members of the committee, one is gun violence is one of our, if not our #1 safety issue. And what are the steps that you will take to reduce gun violence and violent crime in Chicago? And I'll just give you both questions and then you can answer them. The second thing relates to, I think, long-term trust with CPD in communities around the city, but specifically in the south and west side where there's the higher violence. What steps can you take to help really reestablish trust where community residents are working side by side with CPD to reduce the violence that we see in the city?
Thank you so much for the question, Alderman. I believe the 2 questions aren't mutually exclusive in the way I'm going to answer. I think community policing has a connection to building trust, which makes investigating crime, solving crime, and reducing crime, particularly preventative in communities that struggle with gun crime especially. I think there is a community policing effort that's front-facing that we could employ and build upon that's been started here by Charlie Beck, that with the reorganization, obviously pushing more resources towards the neighborhoods so that we can be much more responsive, not only in our prevention and our crime fighting efforts, but also in our investigative efforts in solving crime and taking gun crime perpetrators off the streets, taking more guns off the street, while also building trust so that we could have witnesses come forward and help solve our crime. So I look forward to working with you on letting you know the details of our summer crime fighting plans. It's not starting with me. The Chicago Police Department and its command staff began putting these plans together under Chief Beck, and I wholeheartedly agree with the reorganization and the preliminary planning, but we will also be expanding and fast tracking. And I would just say, we're not waiting for the summer. I hit the ground running last week as acting, and we are putting forth some preliminary efforts. I think if you wait till the summer, it's too late. I think we need to be doing things right now, and there's some things we can do, even with the pandemic, that we can do that I'd love to share with you offline, that can be very effective in not only reducing violent crime, but taking guns off the streets and building relationships in the community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Osterman. If we're all unmuted, if there's any questions or points of contact, please raise your hand, or I'm sorry, points of order, please raise your hand so that I can recognize you. Superintendent, just very quickly from my perspective, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about mayor promotion. I wanted you to speak a little bit on mayor promotion. Your predecessor, as he took the helm as interim superintendent, decided to somewhat cancel mayor promotions or stop the system of mayor promotion. And I understand there were some issues with regard to transparency as well as abuse with merit promotion and the process of merit selection. So right now we have a department that is not completely diverse with regard to those that are entering the police academy for promotions to sergeant, lieutenant, and captain. If we don't have a system that would ensure us some type of diversity with regard to promotion, particularly in Latino and African-American promotions, what are your plans to ensure that the department's supervisory rank is diversified? As I spoke to you earlier, I was within the 25th district during my tenure as a police officer, and there were no African-American supervisors there other than myself. When I left in 2015, There has not been an African-American supervisor in a predominantly Black and Latino district since 2015. The one or two that have come have left immediately. So what would be your plan to ensure that there's diversity within the supervisory rank of sergeant, lieutenant, and captain that are being promoted?
Thank you for the question, Alderman. First of all, diversity is very important to me, and I have already challenged my leadership team to do everything we can to ensure that the demographics of the police department is reflective of the city. As we build diversity, though, in our organization, we also establish better relationships in the community. So I strongly am going to encourage some type of diversity plan. But let me make sure we remind everyone, I know we know this, but the consent decree requires that there be an independent and complete evaluation of our promotional processes, which speaks to diversity. It is in my expectation that this evaluation required by the consent decree will generate a series of recommendations that will address the lack of diversity in the upper ranks of the department that you so very well have alluded to. One item that I would expect to see is a formalized professional development program that deliberately seeks out diversity throughout the department. And I'm a big believer in formalizing professional development programs across all ranks and across all demographic groups. If we want the department to reflect the demographics of the city, then we should have formalized development programs that reflect the department we are trying to create. Another item I think that speaks to your question or relates to diversity is I would like to see a formalized recruitment program, more than just marketing campaigns. I think we should formalize a recruiting team in the city that seeks to address diversity hiring for the department. I plan on working with the city to see how we might be able to do that sooner rather than later. I would also finally like to see an expanded cadet program as much as it is a feeder system for our hiring. We want to make sure our cadet program reflects the diversity that we want in our department. And I think there's a significant opportunity to collaborate with our public schools in the very communities where we serve that can enhance our capabilities to create a diverse department, and following the consent decree, a diverse promotional process enhanced by a very deliberate professional development program. That's help with test taking, help with oral resume giving, and help with developing leadership. We need to be very deliberate in those areas. Otherwise, we're just left with happenstance and repeating the past. And none of us are satisfied with how we've done. We can significantly improve. We made some strides, but it's just not good enough if you look at the numbers. So I wholeheartedly expect to have a significant impact on diversity.
Thank you, Superintendent. I do appreciate your answer to that, but it really doesn't answer the question as to, how are we going to make sure that there's diversity within the promotional ranks? If we start to rely on test taking only as the method for promotion, we have officers that, and I'm quite sure you're well, because this is in Dallas and every other police department. We have officers that work tirelessly, work hard, and do an excellent job in policing, but they may not just be good test takers. And so that officer will never see promotional rank despite his race. He will never see a promotion if he does not test well. So how can you implement some type of transparent and some type of merit system that's going to ensure that these hardworking officers are being recognized for their good work rather than just giving them an honorable mention or department commendation? How can they be recognized with promotion for their tireless work on the police department?
I agree with you that there's people who in police departments who are really good at multiple choice tests that are not the best leaders. So there are gold standard, testing programs across the country that other departments have used for years. For whatever reason, Chicago hadn't adopted best practices. So we again, with the consent decrees guidance, it speaks to this type of program that, we'll be fast tracking, trying to find and presenting to you all as a solution to your concerns regarding the testing aspect of it. You're speaking to the choir regarding multiple choice tests not being the best type of indicator for people who might be great leaders who just don't test well. I agree with that. Other departments have agreed with that, and they have found solutions that I think we can be satisfied with. But we want to find the gold standard testing mechanism that fits our needs. And I will be, through the consent decree, aggressively pursuing a replacement for merit.
Okay, yeah, and I would appreciate your hard work in that effort because, and this is something that I'll continue to talk with you on. We do need a merit system, although it does need to be transparent and it needs to be a system that falls in line with the consent decree. But I don't believe our consent decree said that we should get rid of the merit system. Superintendent, how do we address 16% African-American hires on the department over your last 4 classes? I would say that that number stands very low when it comes down to African-Americans being hired, whether that's an issue that you can deal with or an issue that you can deal with along with our human resources department. How do you increase that number of 16% African-American hire rate on the department? Specifically, if you could address that with regard to psychological exams and as well as polygraph tests. Those are the traditional methods in which African-Americans are disqualified.
It's been my experience, and with my knowledge of what other departments do in relation to your concern, is that recruiting teams can be significantly impactful of your targeted recruiting. And an example would be, all departments are seeking the same diversity. And so we're competing with the same groups to bring them up to our department. And oftentimes it's impacted by the economy. A good economy is hard to recruit diversity. Bad economy, it seems to be better to recruit diversity. But those targeted recruiting teams, an example would be in Dallas, we had a very large Latino recruiting team in our human resources because other cities, Austin, El Paso, San Antonio, all competed for the same group in South Texas. And there's an expertise in this area of recruiting in Texas, trying to get Latinos to leave home. There's some barriers, there's some challenges. I suspect there are significant unique issues in Chicago and surrounding areas of Illinois that if a recruiting team put well together can recruit both African Americans and Latinos in a much more effective and efficient way than just marketing campaigns on radio or in the paper. I think you need people, understanding, selected to understand these groups and what attracts them, and having that face time with people, even virtual, particularly in the college and university settings, can bode well for us in the way we recruit. So I'm excited about the opportunity. I was surprised that you didn't have recruiting teams here specific to the demographics you are targeting. I think that's a great opportunity to create these teams, and I think we all will be pleasantly surprised at the results.
Thank you, Superintendent. My last question, I am very concerned with police suicide on the Chicago Police Department. What was the Dallas Police Department's suicide numbers, and what do you plan to do to improve or to decrease, rather, the number of suicides that are being committed by our Chicago police officers?
I dealt with this. Sorry, go ahead.
No, what plan have you decided to put in place? And that's something I'd like to work with you on as well.
Yeah, and this is a great opportunity to talk about this. This is one of the stigmas that we never talk about. There are many more first responder suicides than there are in the line of duty deaths each and every year. This is a significant, and that's just not active duty first responders. Retirees suffer from this as well. And we put together programs and plans, a very aggressive awareness campaign with the family auxiliaries. We had a very, good wives auxiliary, spouses auxiliary in Dallas that we found that the department being the face of awareness campaign for counseling and mental health services probably wasn't the best opportunity because of the stigma that the department would take action, disciplinary action on people who sought out help. We used our unions, we spun up groups in the mental health community to help us with this. And really we connected with family members to help us make their loved ones who are first responders aware of services. Ordering people to counseling is not the best way to get people help. Talking about this very conversation, Alderman, is one of the best ways we can utilize in removing the stigma. Officers feel like talking about seeking help is a weakness. And if we all begin to, pull back the curtain that this is not a sign of weakness, this is actually a sign of strength to be able to go seek out help. Specifically, what I want to create is a very transparent awareness campaign to our first responders. Number one, to let them know it's okay to say, I need to talk to someone. That's number one. You can't say that enough, that it's okay to talk about, I'm struggling with the job, I'm struggling with what I'm seeing every day. Number two, what things to look out for, the red flags of mental health. All mental health is not created equal. Some just needs to have a peer conversation about what you're seeing or saying. You can also get to the point where you need to talk to a professional. And bringing in your family is really important as well, to share what you're struggling with. So there's a program in Dallas that I like to bring here, but there's no cookie cutter approach. Chicago is not Dallas. There are distinctions, there's uniqueness, but we need to find that sweet spot of care and concern for our officers. And I look forward to partnering with you and others to create the right program, particularly awareness program and campaign for the Chicago Police Department and other first responders.
And this is something I believe is important that we certainly include the FOP on.
Yes.
This is probably one of the most important things that we can be dealing with on the issues of public safety in our Chicago Police Department and Chicago Fire Department. I have had an opportunity to study what they do in LA. LA had gone 2 years without suicide, so it piqued my interest to do a little study on what LA has put together. And I'm very impressed on what they were doing. In fact, I've invited them to Chicago to discuss that a little further with us. But I thank you, Superintendent, for entertaining my questions. I do want to go through other committee members for the sake of time, but I believe we have a hand raised by Alderman Tom Tunney and Alderman Austin. If Alderman Tunney and Alderman Austin have questions for the superintendent, if they could hold on to those questions till after committee members have had an opportunity to speak. But if it's a point of order or point of information or point of clarification, I call on Alderman Tunney first, followed by Alderman Austin.
Chairman?
Yes.
It's Alderman Tunney. I believe I'm a member of the committee. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I was going in order of so that we could have some kind of order here. Alderman Sawyer first, then Mitchell. I was going by ward order. If they didn't have any, we'll proceed to the next.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Alderman Austin, did you have a point of order, information, or clarification?
No, sir, I have a question.
Okay, you're first on my list of non-committee members. Thank you, Superintendent. Alderman Sawyer, do you have any questions or comments for the superintendent?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I have one or two quick questions. Chief, thank you for being here today. Really appreciate it. Vice Chairman Osterman and myself have been very active in promoting a civilian oversight, involvement and oversight ordinance for the city of Chicago. And we're one of at least a couple that are being proposed here in the city of Chicago. what I'd like to ask, if you had an opportunity to review those, and if you did, or just generally speaking, what are specific ways do you think that a community oversight system can help police do its job more efficiently?
Thank you so much for the question, Alderman. I believe in the local democracy and the debate that comes with making the city stronger. I do believe civilians have a role to play in police oversight. I wholeheartedly believe that. I'm also respectful of the history of the civilian oversight debate in the city of Chicago. I've been briefed on it, and I appreciate the council and the mayor having been deeply engaged in determining the full makeup of the structure. I'm confident that ultimately the mayor and council will come to an agreement on the final outstanding issues that remain in this negotiation. I have a long track record of calling it like I see it, and I won't hesitate to follow the same approach in Chicago. There must be real partnership, I believe, with the community. And community oversight can serve as one of the mechanisms to build that partnership and really, quite frankly, build trust. And I favor that approach. So I'm a full supporter of civilian oversight, and I will support whatever the mayor and council negotiate as it relates to the structure of civilian oversight.
Thank you. And I have one other question very quickly as it relates to the FOP contract. As you may well know that we've been involved in negotiations for some time now. We're operating without a contract for our officers right now. And again, just general thoughts of what you may feel that we should be doing, what the rank and file office should be doing, and your office as you get confirmed. What should we all be doing collectively to try to get an FOP contract that's respectful of the citizens and of the police officers that have to do a very, very difficult job?
First of all, I've have been involved in very contentious meet and confer in my previous job as chief in Dallas, and I could just tell you nothing ever comes good out of conflict and consternation as it relates to the contract negotiations. I'm gonna be a strong advocate of cooler heads prevailing in the way we negotiate on both sides. I'll be an advocate in the room for cops, but also I would also be a supporter of the mayor's efforts in her looking at our budget. There's some things we can do to improve our budget, but quite frankly, as it relates to overtime, as it relates to take-home cars. But again, we just need to put all these issues on the table as we negotiate, and I hopefully can be a cool head or a cool hand in the room.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. That's all I have for now.
Thank you, Alderman Sawyer. I do recognize Alderman Sigcho Lopez, Alderman Beale. Is this for point of order, or did you have questions to ask?
I just had a question, but Alderman Sawyer already covered the question that I had.
Okay, and just as a reminder for all non-committee members, you can raise your hand, but it's only for point of orders at this point. I do want to get through committee members with questions and comments first, and then we will go to non-committee members. But in the order of Austin, Sigcho Lopez, and Beale, followed by whomever has raised their hand. Next will be Alderman Mitchell.
Chairman, no questions at this time.
Thank you, Alderman Mitchell. Alderman Thompson, followed by Alderman Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just a quick comment. I want to commend the mayor on her appointment, and also want to congratulate the police board on an excellent job of their search. Chairman Gian Foreman and all of the members of the police board. And I want to, I like the comment, Superintendent, or soon to be Superintendent, your comment regarding the consent decree and how everything starts with the consent decree, because I do believe we need to take that more serious. Back in November, we missed some milestones, and I think we need to focus on that. That's going to help shape and change and improve Chicago. And everything we're doing is coming out of that consent decree. So I really commend you and your focus on that, on the consent decree, because that deals with training, community policing, everything that we're discussing, and it all funnels through that consent decree. So I want to just say I appreciate your focus on that. And I want to welcome you and your wife and your daughter to Chicago. I look forward to working with you, and your resume is excellent, your experience, and we look forward to working with you. And I appreciate we had an opportunity to talk before, and look forward to converting you from a Cowboys fan to a Bears fan. So welcome to Chicago.
Thank you, Alderman Thompson. David Moore and I would probably have something to say about that as well. We did find out that he was a Cowboy fan, and I don't think there are any bigger Cowboy fans in Chicago than Alderman Moore and myself. So we got dibs on him right now. Alderman Lopez, followed by Alderman Curtis.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Chief Brown, and to my colleagues. First off, I want to thank you, Chief Brown, for your phone call the other day when your appointment was announced. I appreciated our time on the phone discussing some of the issues that you've done and dealt with in Dallas. And for my colleagues' sake, I'd actually like to discuss briefly your thoughts and activities when you were in Dallas with regards to the policing of the undocumented community. As you know, Chicago is a welcoming city, a home to thousands of individuals who are here pursuing their version of the American dream. And yet we have seen, particularly in communities like mine and others throughout the city of Chicago, where our men and women in uniform have kind of been buffaloed into engaging in ICE operations by immigration officials calling 911 asking for help, contrary to what our policies are. So I'd like for you to describe your thoughts on that, as well as your past history in Dallas, obviously coming from Texas, as we talked about, not the most welcoming of political climates, but how have you been able to deal with that, and what are your thoughts here for the city of Chicago?
I just want to express, quite frankly, and be clear, under my leadership and the leadership of the mayor, Chicago Police Department will not cooperate with ICE on civil immigration enforcement matters. And I want to make that clear to any and everyone. My history has been similar. We did not cooperate with ICE on civil enforcement matters. We had some cooperation as it relates to violent felons, obviously, but we made it clear as well in Dallas and Dallas County that we would not cooperate in civil enforcement matters. And I hope that's clear. I hope it's crystal clear to everyone.
Yes. And I'm assuming that we will continue in full support of the city's policies therein as well, correct?
Yes.
Wonderful. I want to also talk about, I know you mentioned that you wanted to continue with your predecessor, Superintendent Beck's policies, and that you applauded him for his reorganization. But a number of individuals, including myself, felt that that reorganization slighted the Latino community in particular, where only 1 out of the 6 Latinos that were promoted actually got a promotion. Everyone else had a lateral shift. Do you think that was also something that was something to be commended in Beck's legacy here in the city of Chicago?
I will refer back to my thoughts on the merit, but particularly diversity. I believe in diversity. I believe in being able to reflect the city. So where we fall short on diversity, particularly what you just brought up, I plan to correct and improve. And please hold me accountable. Talk is cheap when it comes to these issues. I want to be held accountable to the things I'm saying to you today as we move forward as a reflection of my ability to lead in a way that you all can be proud of. So it's not just lip service. I plan on seeing and looking at every aspect of diversity, not just in hiring, not just in promotions, but also in assignments as well. It needs to be across the board. So I'll definitely look at that in particular. I wasn't aware, but thank you so much for bringing it up.
Thank you. And then lastly, Chairman, if I may, Chief Brown, I represent not just Latinos, but I represent half my ward is African-American. It's in the 7th district, the Englewood district, which I think we talked about having you come down. One of the things that we've had an issue with is rebuilding the trust and communication between our neighborhoods. And what we found that worked previously with different commanders is not only the openness and engagement between the commanders and the elected officials, but also building that one-on-one time with those true stakeholders in a community, the officer immersion before they hit the streets and things of that nature, as well as the combination of technology, but more of that one-on-one interaction with people. And the question that I have for you is oftentimes we see resistance when it comes to some of our commanders or our lieutenants and sergeants in trying to fully implement those immersion type programs. Will you commit, or are you committed to ensuring that every district focuses on those kind of officer immersion and relationship building tools to get us to a point where all Chicagoans can feel once again that trust between their police officers, so that you're not looking at a confrontational, but a cooperation between community and police again?
The answer is a big yes. I'm completely committed to building relationships and building trust in all neighborhoods. And I don't believe it's a cookie cutter approach. This falls under the umbrella of community policing, but it has to be customized to each of our neighborhoods in the city. There are different needs in different neighborhoods. Every neighborhood is unique, and one size does not fit all as it relates to community policing and building trust. So again, a big yes. And you please let me know where we're struggling as it relates to the commanders and making it happen.
Thank you. Thank you again, Chief Brown, and I look forward to working with you and your team for not just my neighborhoods, but all our neighborhoods. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Curtis, followed by Alderman Scott. Alderman Curtis. Alderman Curtis, if you can unmute. Okay, we'll come back to Alderman Curtis. Alderman
Hello?
Scott.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chief Brown.
Morning.
I'm very excited about you coming. We spoke briefly on the phone, and I want to piggyback a little bit off of Alderman Lopez. I think you kind of answered my question. When it comes down, you spoke about real partnership with the community. And our community policing is totally different what it used to be. What do community policing looks like to you?
What community policing looks like to me is an authentic relationship with people in the community, a grassroots effort to build trust. Oftentimes it means officers connecting with young people, but it can also mean officers connecting with our seniors, officers connecting with our small businesses and our other corporate community. But there needs to be, and I spoke to Chuck Ramsey, who was here when CAPS was created, and talked about what was the original intent. It used to be the model for community policing, and then at some point it lost its way. And Ramsey really was helpful to me in understanding the history of what it was intended going to be, which was what it should be now. We just have to revisit what it is. And we have some of the, a little bit sprinkles of recreating the right template with our district coordination officers. And I hope that some of you in the 25th district and the 15th district are agreeing with me that could be a great template to expand throughout all districts to revisit the original intent and really expand on our community policing efforts with the idea that it has to be customized for each of our neighborhoods, each of our wards, each of our districts.
Right. That's kind of ironic because Charles Ramsey is actually the reason why I got into law enforcement. He kind of made it me not having a choice. So I appreciate him. And that was real policing, community policing to me. He was a sergeant back at that time. Also, in your decision-making process, how open are you when it deals with decision-making?
I'm a listening ear. I'm no know-it-all. Although I've seen a lot and have a lot of experience, I make sure I convey I'm no know-it-all. And there's a little bit of a learning curve, but I've hit the ground running in building relationships inside Chicago Police Department and in neighborhoods. And COVID-19 creates a challenge with face-to-face, but we'll figure out this virtual relationship best we can, and we'll get to where we need to be.
It's going to be exciting working with you. Thanks so much, Chairman, and wish you luck, Chief. Thanks.
Thank you, Alderman Curtis. Alderman Scott, followed by Alderman Ervin.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Chief, and good morning to my colleagues. My question is centered around what we talked about when you called me, and I do appreciate the call and your honesty and sincerity on the call when we talked. I want to talk about leadership and how we create a bench, if you will, in terms of our next leaders in the city of Chicago. I firmly believe that if you cannot see it, you cannot be it. And so if you can't see yourself as you did in Dallas, work yourself up from a PO all the way to the chief of police, then I don't think you are going to work as hard because you can't see yourself meeting your end goal. So what are you going to do to create that bench of leaders, our next leaders in Chicago, when you turn the city around and make it the safest city in America? Who's going to be there to man the helm when you're gone, and how are you going to do that?
Yes, I see this as one of my top priorities, creating a deep bench for this department, for this city to select within. And I believe you have to do it deliberately, that it doesn't happen on its own, that you have to create formalized professional development program. You have to seek out training for your rising stars and invest time in mentoring and exposure with these folks. This is my story. People invested in me. They had a formal professional development program. I got a chance to go to outside schools. I got a chance to experience City Hall from deputy city manager's position, understanding budgets much more than most cops get exposed to. I got a chance to finish my education, got my MBA while on the job. People encouraged me. So again, I think it's not happenstance that leaders rise to the top. They're born, but they're also made. And I believe in that. So I will be quickly finding the best professional development program in the country and implementing it here in Chicago to develop the bench that we sorely need inside the police department of Chicago. I believe in these folks. You got some good folks here. And I believe that you all can be proud of this department if we invest the time and mentoring in these folks and get them exposed to the many difficult challenges in city government so that they can shine. And I'm looking forward to it. It's the most exciting thing that I'm looking forward to.
Well, that is great to hear. You know, when talking to Guion, he mentioned that there were, people who were just a little bit hesitant to apply. My commitment is if I can help through this body, if we can help to kind of promote those folks. I talked to the chairman. We would like to help you identify those people who may want to be in leadership and work with that. My second question is our numbers are down over the last couple of years, and that is a testament to the officers and past leadership. But people in the neighborhoods don't often feel as safe, even though the numbers are down. And on the west and south sides, particularly in Lawndale and East and West Garfield, the quality of life and people being able to come outside of their doors is just not there. And oftentimes it is, this officer who used to be officer friendly, or the folks who used to be on the beat, just aren't making connection with the community. And I heard you talk a little bit about CAPS and what you want to do Can you just expand on how we're going to work with our people being able to have a better quality of life, even though violent crimes and things are down across the city of Chicago? People still want to be able to come out, use their park, sit in front of their porch, and not have to worry about the guy on the corner or the selling drugs down the street.
Yes, of course. And I look forward to this as much as anything, trying to find new, innovative, creative ways to engage people. There are many examples of this. I think that the easiest ones are what we do with young people, particularly in our most challenging areas where we have high violent crime. These perceptions of crime and the realities of crime are not one and the same. You know, you can have great success statistically, but that doesn't mean anything to people if they don't feel safe. So those perceptions are real. So, you know, what I like about interacting with young people and catering programs for young people, that it brings the family. If you do something positive for a young person, their mother, their father, their grandparent, their aunt, uncle, all appreciate it. So now you have a whole family unit that appreciates your interaction with a young person. That's just the low-hanging fruit, in my opinion. I think there's also things we can do to be helpful to small businesses and programming community policing towards small businesses, and also for our seniors. And I think the corporate community sponsorship of our community policing program is ripe. I think there's a wealth of opportunities there with the corporate community to come in to these really challenging areas and support and sponsor programs that are directed toward these many varied groups that can begin to chip away at the perceptions that I'm safe. So I look forward to any ideas you might have. I've already started looking at programs. You have some nonprofits in place that's reached out to me already. I look forward to expanding on whatever street outreach can do to be helpful. But this is my wheelhouse. This is where I think effective policing should be. I think if you're going to be a safer city, if you're going to be the safest in the country, you have to be community policing facing in all of your efforts. Even if you're having to use enforcement to some extent, it ought to be community oriented in the way it's done.
Well, that's great to hear. Lastly, I just want to offer my help when it comes to the summer plan. I know we'll need all hands on deck, and I'm glad that you're thinking about what we can do, some of the reduce violence now. And I'm sure most of my colleagues are willing to do that. So as soon as we can, as soon as you're confirmed, there is a great need on the west side of Chicago. And I know that my colleagues that are on the west side and my colleagues on the south side would love to be able to help you with that. I again, thank you for sitting with us. I commend the man for this appointment and bringing you to the city of Chicago. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Scott. Superintendent, you know, before we move forward to Alderman Ervin, my condolences to your police family here in Chicago on the loss of another member to the COVID-19 pandemic. I know you've had an opportunity to go through many of the districts to speak to the officers. What can you do to improve on protecting our officers during the COVID-19 pandemic?
One of the things I'm a big believer is never sit on your laurels thinking you have everything that you need. You know, we have what we need, but we can always look for other opportunities to protect our officers. And we're constantly looking for other ways. We're working with our unions, we're working with the mayor's office, and we're working with those folks that are philanthropic that have given us masks and other equipment. And we're continuing to look and talk with other cities. I have a weekly phone call with the chief in Los Angeles and the commissioner in New York about what they're doing. So, you know, please feel free. I want this to be a little bit of a free-flowing information exchange on what is the latest and greatest idea as it relates to protecting our officers, equipment-wise, and other support mechanism, because our officers will make the sacrifices, but like any of us, we're concerned about bringing something home to our families and all of the misinformation, just everything is just so concerning with COVID-19 is that any and everything we can do, also emphasizing washing your hands, following the other guidance as it relates to distancing, social distancing as well, is key to keeping our first responders safe. So any help in that area, please feel free to give me a call.
Thank you, Superintendent. Before we move to Alderman Ervin, I just want to reiterate that non-committee members wishing to speak, I do have the raise your hand function that I see. I just did verify with Tiffany as well that every member can unmute. And so if you need to, I'll call out a point of order, call a point of information, or a point of clarification. Please unmute, and at the earliest opportunity, you can step forward and come forward with your point of order. I have Austin, Sigcho Lopez, Beale, Moore, and Waguespack in that order when we get to non-committee members. Alderman Ervin, if you could go ahead with your questions and comments, followed by Alderman Reboyes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Also welcome Superintendent Brown. I do have one point before we start, and I don't know if you did this or not.
The volume is low. I can't hear the Alderman.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you fine. Thank you.
Okay, this is a point for the chairman. Did we formally accept the appointment directly?
I'm sorry?
Did we formally accept the appointment directly into committee?
We have not, but we can do that. Alderman Ervin, thank you so much for bringing that point up.
Okay. Secondly, the community policing, we talk about community policing, and we could take a district, just as Alderman Scott indicated, he and I neighbor one another. How do you get back to a true community policing essence if officers, most community policing looks at maybe having 60 to 70% of your time obligated, but in districts where cops are bouncing from call to call to call, how do you generate a true sense of community policing with beat officers if they don't have time to engage people, residents, and businesses on their various beats?
I think that's the template that I was mentioning in relation to the district coordination officers. They're taking out of the call pool, and I think a restructuring or rethinking of CAPS as well can bode well for speaking to your concern. How do you free up the time? And again, it's only in 25th and 15th district for the DCOs, but expansion of that, even while we are dealing with the pandemic, is our goal, sooner rather than later, if you will.
Okay. Another point that Alderman Scott actually brought up as well about quality of life relates to something that we've titled as a criminal-related loyalty.
You're fading again, sir.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, there you go.
I was trying to, as it relates to what we've titled criminal-related loitering. This is the loitering around crimes such as prostitution, narcotics. Can you tell me from your experiences back in Dallas, how did you work and deal with loitering and other issues around the sale of drugs, prostitution, and other illegal activities?
Yes, so you hit on a point where we talk about crime and disorder. And really the overarching theme of our efforts ought to be focused on people, places, and behaviors that contribute to crime. And you layer on top of that gang, guns, and drugs. And then you work your operational plans, tactics, and community policing efforts around where the data points you. And again, and don't be afraid to be creative and innovative, but also don't be afraid to be anticipatory. You can anticipate based on historical data kind of what you see every summer, but where you see it every summer, when it happens every summer, and how it happens every summer might be a little nuanced by neighborhood, but it won't be much. But what you're unlimited by the innovation and creativity. You know, I try not to do things that don't work. That's first thing I try to do. Are we doing something that doesn't work? Let's stop doing that. And let's try something new. And let's try the things that does work. And let's expand on that. I mean, I try to keep common sense in our methodologies, and you know, doing things that don't work is just one of those common sense things. But I've learned common sense is not so common sometimes. So I'll be pushing some common sense approaches to not only our data, and again, overarching people, places, and behaviors, gang, guns, and drugs, while also maintaining our constitutional policing overarching viewpoint.
Okay. One additional point, and this actually came from a constituent. With your experience back in Dallas with the incident where the five officers unfortunately lost their lives, help us to understand your decision-making process and how and why you felt it was necessary to essentially end the individual's life who perpetrated these acts, when at that point in time, that person did not, in what, from a layperson's perspective, did not pose an immediate threat to anyone other than him or herself, and ultimately you decided to terminate that individual's life. Can you help us to understand what went into making that decision and why you ultimately decided to put that explosive device that ultimately terminated his life?
First of all, I'd like to correct the information that the constituent received regarding what transpired. There was not a period of time where the person stopped shooting at us at all. And he was an imminent threat to our residents and to our officers throughout the whole ordeal. He was cornered on the second floor of a community college in our downtown area, but he had an unlimited supply of weaponry and of bullets, and the only cover our officers who were negotiating with him had was sheetrock, which bullets go through sheetrock. But we still try to resolve this ordeal peacefully through 4 hours of negotiating with a sniper who was shooting at us while we were negotiating with him to give up. 4 hours, for 4 hours. And what may not be known to your constituent also is that he shot and killed the 5th officer from that second floor school shooting while shooting at us, trying to get him to give up. And we looked at several options. All of the options involve more officers being seriously injured or killed, except for weaponizing the bomb robot. And given the same circumstances, I will make the same decision to save more lives. He not only killed 5 officers, he seriously wounded 9 citizens in our downtown area during that ordeal. And so there's this review of all these circumstances went before an independent grand jury. They're in Dallas, and we were justified in our actions according to the independent grand jury.
Thank you, Superintendent. I really appreciate you, number one, clearing up the facts around the incident, and quite frankly, based on what you just said, given those set of circumstances, I can 100% agree with the decision that you made at that particular point in time. That's why I guess it's good to have these types of conversations, clear up any type of ambiguity in what transpired and what happened in those incidents. Again, we welcome you to the city of Chicago. We look forward to working with you in the city. But hey, let's not wait until summer, because a lot of these issues that you will see in this city, the weather doesn't necessarily dictate them, especially in some of our challenged districts on the south and west side of Chicago. And again, I just think that, you know, number one, as chairman of the Black Caucus, public safety is one of the top issues and concerns of our community as a whole throughout the city. And also, we look forward to working with you to find a constitutional methods of policing, but also respecting the rights of our citizens that are victims of crime. And when I talk about victims, I'm talking about being victimized by not being able to ride your bike on the street. I have a 3-year-old who rides her bike up and down the hallway because if I'm not able to be outside properly supervising and outside with some people, sometimes, you know, you don't feel comfortable doing some things. And we want to have the same level of comfort in Garfield Park as the folks do in Lincoln Park. So we just really want you to know and understand where we're coming from. We have been told a lot. We have been promised a lot, but yet some of the same conditions that existed in some of these communities. And when you get a chance to come out here, I've been telling people they've been selling dope on the corner of Wilcox and Springfield for the last 40 years. And why can't we solve their problem? So if you can solve their problem, I know that you are the man for the job. But again, you will hear these types of stories across our city. And again, we hope that you can bring some innovative problem solving to help us with the challenges our residents face on a daily basis. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, Superintendent, we look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Alderman Ervin. Alderman Cappleman, I do have you down for questions. Alderman Reboyes, followed by Alderman Mitz.
No questions.
Thank you, Alderman Reboyes. Alderman Mitz, followed by Alderman Spazzato.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to you, Chief Beck, and thank you for being with us. I do have a question surrounding the current situation we're in now, and with the virus for our community. We have people who still tend to not want to obey the shelter-in-place ordinance, and we have more people out on the street than you would have downtown. And I want to know what your thoughts surrounding. You can tell them to stay in, but how are the police dealing with the situation? I see them at various locations. Are we giving an education to these people that are standing out? If you can tell me what your plans are as it get warmer going through the summer. I'm concerned about crowds dispersing in large numbers, and what are the police prepared for?
Thank you so much for your question, Alderman. The Chicago Police Department hadn't waited for me to get confirmed to start dealing with this subject matter. We've had over 3,700 dispersals. We've written 11 citations, and we've made 17 arrests regarding following the stay-at-home order. And I'll be making sure that we stay on top of where we have lots of congregating in our areas. And please forward any that you see us not dealing with so that we can be on top of it. But I get a daily report from our commanders relates to their dispersal, citations, and arrests as it relates to this stay-at-home order. So please feel free to forward to me any you see us not dealing with.
No, usually we can call in to 311 and make those complaints. of people standing out, and they could forward those on to the police department.
Thank you.
I will continue to do that as well. But I want to know also, when we talked about the CAPS program, for the last 20 years, we've been talking about the beat alignments. Is there any insight you can give us, or if you looked at realignment of beats?
I haven't looked at that at all. But again, in our review of the consent decree, there's areas where, you know, periodic reviews have to be made, and we're flexible enough. That's quite an undertaking. And so I would like to say we'll look at it, but we have no immediate plans to make any beat alignment changes.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent. Chief, we look forward to confirmation and continuing to work with you to make all of Chicago safer. Hope we can get through all of the virus we're dealing with now, the trouble we're dealing in our community. So I look forward to sitting down with you and going over some of the concerns that I have personally for our community.
Thank you, Alderman Mitz. Alderman Sposato, followed by Alderman Nugent.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome, Acting Superintendent Brown. Nice to talk to you again.
Yes.
I know your goal, you said, is to speak to every alderman. That's going to be one tough goal. I'd like to see you focus a little bit more on meeting with and talking to every commander first to get a little handle on every district. So
Gotcha.
You are a bit of a crazy guy in my mind, because you have the second toughest job in the city that you're willing to accept. So mayor first, police superintendent second, and alderman third, and that's just my opinion. So but welcome once again. I've been writing stuff down left and right. I'm not going to not dominate this conversation. I'll get together with you afterwards. I do know you have some challenges, but you know, back in the day, 20 years ago, you'd have about 40,000 people signing up to take this test, and that list would last for 5-6 years, whatever. Now we're doing it twice a year. You're getting 4,500 people signing up, and 25 are actually taking the test. We are currently going through 10 people to get one probationary police officer. So I don't know what the challenges are with that, but obviously you have to be squeaky clean. And that's really about it. I just want to say welcome. I know you did say one thing, and I know you didn't mean anything about it, but I did write it down that I need to mention. You said you want to make this the greatest the police department. Well, we already are the greatest, so we just need you to maintain it as the greatest. So that's my opinion. So you do have some great leadership. Let me tell you, I know your leadership a lot. I talked to a lot of the people in leadership, and you were dealt a pretty good bunch of cards to run the city. But welcome. You need me for anything, you have my phone number. You certainly have my support, and I'll be talking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Alderman.
Thank you, Alderman Sposato. Alderman Nugent, followed by Alderman Napolitano.
Good morning, Chairman, and good morning, Acting Superintendent. A warm welcome to you and your family to the city of Chicago. I wish you well. Really quickly, I wanted to touch on up here in the Northwest side. My ward in particular is covered by 2 police districts, the 17th and 16th. 17 is the lowest staff district in the city, and 16 is the 3rd lowest staff. We've seen quite a bit of shootings in 17 in recent weeks, even as we're under this COVID lockdown. I'm just curious your thoughts on how you would be deploying staff and resources as superintendent to combat some of these issues. Thank you for your response, and welcome to the city.
Thank you, Alderman. I really appreciate your question as well. You know, during my career, I've always based decisions on staffing on data with the idea to create some flexibility for emerging issues, but letting data be my guide on deploying these precious resources. And I suspect I'll be deploying the same worldview on these resources. So I'm always open to listen to concerns regarding emerging issues but I'm less inclined to reshuffle the deck based on anecdotal commentary, more so on specific things that we can support with data. But again, please, again, there's some flexibility that has to be in any and all of our efforts based on real time what's happening on the ground. So I'm always open and listening to each of your concerns regarding things happening in your ward. And I suspect that I'll be deploying resources in response to that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your response and welcome to Chicago.
Thanks.
Thank you, Alderman Nugent. Alderman Napolitano, followed by Alderman Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, or I should say good afternoon, Acting Superintendent Brown. Glad to have you aboard. I got a couple of very quick questions. There's a statement brought up about fixing community relationships with the police. One thing I'm hoping that you could do in your tenure here is kind of fix the relationship between Chicago and communities, aside from the police relationship. And what I mean by that is a lot of Chicagoans have become fearful of the city of Chicago. As you know, you're stepping into a position now where even during the COVID virus, we're seeing shootings of 27 people shot over the weekend, 18 people shot over the weekend, 21 people shot over the weekend, on top of in 10 years, we've had almost 19,000 people shot in the city of Chicago. So what I'm hoping for is hopefully as we're establishing the way CAPS works again with the community, I'm hoping that we're getting more community involvement within the community. These shootings are done by all of our communities around the city. And that's keeping people from going downtown as we see an overload in crime that was hitting the business districts with carjackings and mob actions in the stores. Do you have any type of plan getting involved in the more community relationships inside the community on this behalf? I mean, this is not so much police generated, this is more community generated.
Sure. I've had, to do both. Of course, inside the community is really important for our officers, but for me personally, I enjoy that aspect the most. And the challenge obviously now being, we can't gather, but I'd love to visit with, if you're speaking of visiting with your chambers, with your supporters of the city, to make them more comfortable with what we're doing, and explaining why we're doing it, but also getting connected with the corporate community, with business groups. I'd love to do all of that. I think that can be a force multiplier of our efforts. People want to be helpful if you just explain where the need is. And so please feel free to give me some guidance on what you think I personally need to be helpful in the area of helping the city understand and be more comfortable and trust our policing.
Absolutely. I just got two more very quick things. When my colleague, Alderman Nugent, talked about adequate staffing of districts, I hope going forward we could take into account the size of districts and the way those data numbers might not be high in one category, but could be higher in another category. But the size of our district compared to other districts could play a factor as well. As the 16th district is 32 square miles, where other districts are close to 8 square miles. And I know everyone's fighting for more police officers in their districts. I just hope that can kind of become part of the conversation going forward in your tenure here. I actually wouldn't mind seeing a reallocation of districts going forward as well, the size-wise of them. Is that something you'd possibly consider doing?
I definitely have no immediate plans to do, but I'd be happy to review any and all of what we're doing. And I think density is one aspect, but also geography should be another aspect. I need to look at the data requirements on our computer programs to ensure that have the right facing requirements so that we can have the best results, with the idea of being flexible beyond what the data shows, but be the exception, not the rule. The exception being, obviously something you do very carefully.
Absolutely. And my last is just a statement, and it's towards you as a person, and I think I already know what type of person you are. I just hope that we always have your support for our police officers, especially going forward with this COVID-19 virus, and showing and making a strong statement that these officers that we are losing, that it is in the line of duty. These officers are contracting this while they are serving the city of Chicago. My brother contracted it as a police officer. As you and I had talked about, I lost a good friend who I served with on the police department to this virus. And I hope that this is never going to be a question going forward. And I know it's out of your hands, but with your support behind us, and I know with the mayors as well, we can show that these heroes out there, police, fire, city workers in general, that they are doing their job. There's no dereliction of duty. And unfortunately, this is something that has happened to them, and these will be in the line of duty or duty related losses that we're suffering.
Yes, sir. I'm a strong advocate for cops, and I honestly care about them as people. So we're on the same page.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chairman. Sorry to take so much time. Good luck, sir, and I'll support you in any way I can. Thank you. Glad to have you aboard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Napolitano. Alderman Coleman, I do have your hand raised to ask questions as well. Alderman Smith, followed by Alderman Tunney.
Hello.
Alderman Smith, yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Yes. Superintendent Brown, welcome to Chicago, and I look forward very much to working with you. Something happened to my video. Okay. We look very much forward to working with you. I'd like to bring up the thorny issue of juvenile crime. And I wanted to ask about your experience, in your many years of experience, in what you think works and doesn't work. There's a wide range of opinions about juvenile crime. We've had everything in our city from incredibly horrible conditions for kids in juvenile jails to the complete other extreme of really not prosecuting a lot of juveniles. And many of us think that the current system we have really isn't working because kids aren't getting, they're not being incarcerated, and we're not calling on that, but they're also not necessarily getting the social services that they should be getting in support. We've recently had an audit of our juvenile justice support center here in the city that was very critical of what we are doing right now. And so I'd like to know, what is your experience and what approach towards juvenile crime do you personally think is effective?
One of the things that I'm most proud of in my past interactions with the Dallas court systems as it relates to juvenile crime is that we created very successful diversion programs for young people, particularly for young people who got involved, first-time offenders, diversion programs for low-level crimes, while at the same time, those juvenile violent offenders, we accepted the fact that we may have to take some of them off the street by incarcerating them. And the diversion programs can be varied: drug treatment, mental health counseling, family support, parenting. As part of the diversion, is a best practice across the country. And I think you all would do well to follow that path if you're not already. I look forward to interacting with the court systems as it relates to juvenile crime to be helpful in my ideas regarding diversion programs that work for our young people. The more you can get our young people back on the right path if they haven't gone too far, the better and safer we all are. And at the same time, we have to accept the small subset of young people who are violent and it would hurt us, may have to be incarcerated.
Well, thank you very much, Superintendent. I really hope that we can sit down and discuss this at greater length. We're very committed to trying to make the system better. So thank you and welcome to Chicago, and I look forward to your service, sir.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Alderman Smith. Alderman Tunney, followed by Alderman Gardner.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome to Chicago, Superintendent. You talk about your record in Dallas. I see some similarities with Dallas and Chicago in regards to the LGBT community. I spent a summer or two there, and the north side was where the gay community was. Could you, speaking to the residents of Chicago, would you talk a little bit about maybe some improvements that came under your tenure in regards to the LGBT community relations, number one? Number two, will you talk about not only recruiting, but promoting and certainly making it very comfortable for LGBT police officers to be in their districts? I think currently we have maybe one or two LGBT liaisons in the entire city. And obviously, you know, every neighborhood has LGBT residents and families. And in a lot of ways, our LGBT youth really is just like other youth. I shouldn't say specifically, but I'm specifically talking about the LGBT youth. They're really not safe in their neighborhoods on the south and west side. In fact, maybe parts of the north side. But as the second most important leader in the city, what messages will you bring confidence that you are respectful and understanding to the LGBT community in the city of Chicago?
Thank you for the question, Alderman. First of all, the idea of constitutional policing speaks to treating everyone with respect, regardless of race, sex, and sexual orientation. I believe that if we're doing our jobs right, we should be partners with all communities, including the LGBTQ community. In Dallas, we had a pretty expansive liaison program. Here in Chicago, the consent decree requires Chicago Police Department to do better in its relationship building with the LGBTQ community. But again, I have this idea of doing what's right when no one looking is true ethics. You know, just meeting the requirements of consent decree should be a minimum standard. We should be going above and beyond and creating varied programs to ensure that our LGBT community and other communities are treated with respect, that their concerns are dealt with in the most responsive ways, including our investigations if hate crime designations are appropriate. So I had this great record in Dallas, but again, talk is cheap in this area. You have to make it happen as it relates to building this relationship. And I look forward to working with you and others and ensuring that we respect our LGBTQ community.
Thank you, Superintendent. And just for the record, you know, I've been on the council almost 20 years, and there's a feeling that in the Latino and African-American community that the young LGBT or lesbians and gays in their community just really feel that there's a two-tiered system. And I think we can do a lot to improve that. And I look forward to working with you on it. Thank you. That's my only question.
Thank you, Alderman Tunney. Alderman Gardner, followed by Alderman Martin.
Yes, mine is more of a comment or a suggestion, just for sake of time. You know, I know welcome Superintendent to the city of Chicago. I congratulate you. You have a huge task in front of you. If I could say one thing or a suggestion is that coming from Dallas and never, as I take it, you never lived in the city of Chicago, I think it's imperative for you in the position that you're currently taking to take the time, and I know you mentioned it earlier, and it sounds great, but actually come out to certain communities, and the communities that I serve as an alderman, like Portage Park and Gladstone Park and Jefferson Park, just so they're not names that you hear, and when you hear aldermen and colleagues that surround the area that I serve, like Alderman Cardona, Alderman Villegas, Alderman Napolitano, and Sposato, and Nugent. There's reasons why we're asking for certain help to address a potential rise, a serious rise in dangerous crimes. And we beg that you take that time, that you actually live up to that promise of coming out to our community and taking a look at it and seeing to have a better understanding of why it is we're asking for certain services. And I think you will do yourself a justice. It'll be a great investment of time, whether it's a Saturday or Sunday, whether it's 8 o'clock at night, 9 o'clock at night. One of the things that I pride myself on serving the 45th Ward is that I don't care if it's a Sunday, I don't care if it's midnight. I will check out an alley apron, I will check out a curb, whatever it is. And I suggest you do the same. So when we come to you and talk to you about certain things, whether it be Bridgeport or Inglewood or West Garfield Park, that you actually have some substance and you have some experience and knowledge of being in that community, and you have a better feel for what it is that we're asking. So on that note, I congratulate you. I wish you the very best. And I beg of you to take that time and invest that time into as many communities, if not all the communities, as possible.
Great advice. I plan on taking you up on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Gardner. Alderman Martin, followed by Alderman Silverstein.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Chief, very much for your time and for your continued willingness to serve. I am impressed with your background for a number of reasons, including the fact that you had a similar role in Dallas. You've transitioned out of that, and you're interested in coming back and serving Chicago, which we very much appreciate. Also very heartened to hear about your commitment to community policing and rethinking that, ways that we can make it appropriate depending on the particular needs of our communities, as well as your commitment to the consent decree and making sure that it's not something that we're dragged into doing, but that we can do in an affirmative and positive way. So thank you for that. Two questions for you. The first being, I was hoping you could say a little bit more about your experience as a deputy city manager and the insights that has provided you into some of the administrative tasks that you had mentioned earlier today, namely overtime and the like. And then second, I wanted to ask you a question about policymaking. You mentioned civilian oversight. I know that Alderman Sawyer, Alderman Osterman are taking the lead on that. And we know with regard to things like stop and frisk, that's something that police departments from time to time have utilized. I think New York is a good example where they had used that despite the community voicing its opposition. So I was hoping you could say a little bit about the lessons that you take from situations like New York and other places in terms of involving people from outside of the police department, making the policies that affect all of us.
Sure. Let's start with your first question regarding my time as a deputy city manager. We call it assistant city manager in Dallas, but it's similar titles. It was part of my professional development as the first assistant chief there in Dallas, much like your first deputy. And I oversaw different departments, not police or fire. I oversaw libraries, park and rec, code compliance as my main departments. And I got a chance to go through a budget cycle with each of those departments. And I started to understand the impacts of one department's budget over another budget. There's only so many slices of the pie that you have. And I had that aha moment that, overages in particular departments' budgets have these negative impacts on departments that can be helpful. We were asking the city to create more rec time for our young people, but they had a cost to it that, if we were over our budget and police took money from park and rec department. So, and that's one of the best professional development assignments I had, just to really get a clear understanding of the impacts of budget. But also, your second question is what I think about policies. What I also learned in that assignment really helps me answer the second question. And I'll answer it. I'm not trying to be flippant, but I do not want to be the 51st alderman as it relates to policies. I don't believe it's the role of department heads to tip the scales of whatever strong debate you're having as it relates to policies in the mayor's office. I want to be supportive of whatever you decide, but I don't believe it's my role to tip the scales on what you decide, if that makes sense. And I hope you can be respectful of that, but I've seen that go awfully wrong with department directors trying to weigh in on things that affected them in the legislative aspects of city government. And I've seen careers ended by taking the wrong stance and interjecting when they shouldn't. And so it was a lesson learned for me, and I don't suspect I'll be weighing in as the 51st alderman.
Understood. I completely appreciate that in the position that you're in. One thing I would say, not just specific to community oversight, but generally is you're a person with tremendous experience, tremendous expertise. And so I think that fine line between sharing that expertise in a way that we can take that into account as we make some of these broader decisions versus just coming in and saying what you think should happen. Very delicate line, but one that I think is important because we need your feedback, we need your expertise. So thank you again for your time, also for the conversations we had previous to today, and thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Martin. Alderman Silverstein.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
I can.
Welcome, Acting Superintendent. I also just have a comment. First of all, I wanted to thank you for reaching out to me earlier and taking some time to talk about ward-specific issues. So thank you for doing that. And I just want to piggyback on what Alderman Gardner said. I can't agree more with him, the importance of you coming out to our wards. We all have different wards, and mine is extremely diverse. And I want to have the opportunity to take you around, to show you the ward, and to explain to you what we've been doing to make sure that everybody stays safe. So please, if you could find some time to do that, I think it would be very worthwhile for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Silverstein. That concludes all the questions from members of the committee.
Chairman?
Yes. If I could ask who's speaking?
Alderman James Cappleman.
Alderman Cappleman, yes. I was gonna actually, Alderman Cappleman, go to non-committee members, and I do have you after Alderman Waguespack.
Great, thank you.
Is that fine? That concludes all the questions from committee members. Committee members, if you have any questions, if you could now use the raise your hand function. I will ask for questions and comments from non-committee members, starting with Alderman
Chair,
Austin.
can I request, Chair, excuse me, can I request like a 5-minute break now as we go to non-committee members? Just to rest room.
Acting Superintendent Brown, absolutely. We'll take a 5-minute recess. Can I get a motion to recess?
So moved, Chairman.
So moved.
Raymond Lopez.
So moved by Alderman Lopez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The committee will stand in recess for 5 minutes. We will reconvene at 12:52.
All right.
Are we back on?
Are we
Chris,
back?
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Nick. I was looking
Hi,
to see.
good. I couldn't hear
We
you.
had the
Okay.
superintendent back with us.
You guys kicked him out. He don't know how to get back in.
Just to let everyone know, we are being live streamed, and so just be careful what you say. But as soon as the superintendent gets back, we'll go ahead and start. My wife immediately told me 5 minutes. You should have just recessed until 1. But yeah, just to let everyone know, you are live stream.
Just so you know, it's almost 1 already, so.
Okay, we're back. Acting Superintendent Brown, you ready? Can you hear us?
You're good. Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. The Committee on Public Safety is back in order. Back in session. We finished questions and comments from committee members. We will start questions and comments from non-committee members, starting with Alderman Austin. But before Alderman Austin starts, if there's any non-committee members that wishes to speak, I'm sorry, if there are any committee members that wishes to speak, if the committee members can please use the raise your hand, the raise your hand function, so that I can recognize you as well. Alderman Austin, are you with us? Alderman Austin? Okay, let's go to Alderman Sigcho Lopez, and we'll come back to Alderman Austin.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, thank you. I was on mute. A little bit just expanding, and thank you for sharing with us your vision, Mr. Brown. I think one of the concerns, obviously, and I hear a lot during the summertime, obviously has to do with violence prevention. So my question goes, maybe to expand. I know that you have talked to, a little bit about different ways, different approaches. This is directly on youth, on directing on the youth, and how we can be less reactive and more proactive. I know that there's a number of initiatives that have here in the ward that have worked well when we work with restorative justice practices, interrupters, and other approaches. So can you expand a little bit on maybe your experience with this kind of approach on violence prevention, working directly with youth, and how do you see? Because obviously for us it seems like the big problem is, like, even though we see good results, is the lack of resources. So how do you see these programs? What's your experience on it, and maybe what is the best way to make sure that there's collaboration to add this when we look into the issue of community policing?
Yes, let me just start with, and thank you so much for the question, Alderman. Let me just start with my experience, and then you'll understand what my approach will be here in Chicago. So in Dallas, we had street outreach, interrupters, gang interveners, and they were called urban specialists. And they were led by Pastor Omar Jawar, who has a national reputation for this idea of interacting with police and gang and gun crime perpetrators, particularly young people. And to be quite frank, he saved our butt on more than one occasion as it relates to these retaliations in the gang world, these petty beefs that leads to extreme violence. He was able to be the face of mediation, and but for the egos of policing, these are vital tools to use to help us intervene to prevent further violence. I always say the best way to reduce crime is to prevent it from happening in the first place. And that seems so common sense, but any ways we can interact with our street outreach gang interrupters, and that means sharing information with them. And it also means listening to them and the ways they want to intervene and allowing them the space to work in the neighborhood with these young people. And I plan on bringing that approach. I've seen it work. I also plan on trying new, innovative, creative approaches as it relates to using these folks in helping us reduce gang and gun crime in our neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Point of information.
Point of information, which Alderman is speaking?
Alderman Sawyer.
Point of information, Alderman Sawyer.
Just very quickly, Chief Brown, what was your budget in Dallas for the outreach for the gun violence prevention?
So we did not have a city budget for them. They received significant philanthropic dollars. It is significant to do
you have an
work.
idea what that would be?
I believe they've got about several million. I don't know the exact number, but it was several million, and the opportunity to go back for more if they needed it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Sawyer. The chair recognizes Alderman Sigcho Lopez for questions still.
Yes, so just the last one, and thank you again, Mr. Brown. And Alderman Sawyer, I also want to thank you for taking on the issue and previously about police accountability reform. So I look forward to resuming those conversations soon. But I want to acknowledge your leadership on that. The last question, it comes again in terms of maybe what is the briefing that you have received in terms of the Chicago Public Schools? What do you see is the role of CPD? And maybe that you have had any assessment in that area, and obviously maybe any other approaches or experience that you bring from Dallas that may be helpful to make sure that our approach is following guidelines and obviously best practices. Thank you.
Sure. Of course, we know we have the School Resource Officer Program in Chicago Public Schools. I have not received a specific briefing as it relates to emerging issues in the public schools, but of course, we are required by the consent decree to provide training in the selection process and update our memorandums of understanding in our Chicago public schools. But I could just say my experience has been specifically in our most challenging neighborhoods, that our public schools, particularly our elementary and middle schools, are great collaborators with any of our community policing programs. Any ways we can connect, and I have specific ways I connected in Dallas. I don't want to assume that will work here in Chicago. There may be different ways to work with the schools in Chicago, but any collaboration you can work really helps build trust and communication. We work with the school bands. We work with the school ROTC. We work with the arts community and our schools to create programs between our officers. We found officers that had, arts backgrounds, that had musical capabilities, that knew how to play the piano, and we created, choirs. And I mean, it's just an unlimited innovation as it relates to how you interact with young people. Of course, we know our schools are out, I guess, for an indeterminate amount of time, but we could figure this out virtually, like we're doing here with this meeting. There's some ways we can interact with young people virtually. They're all on Instagram anyway, or TikTok. So there's some ways that we can create some interactions, even in this pandemic, that can help us build trust with young people and their families, and in working with the schools.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Alderman Sigcho Lopez. Is Alderman Austin back with us? Alderman Beale, followed by Alderman Moore. Alderman Beale with us?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Beale.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chief.
Good afternoon.
First, let me thank you for stepping forward to take on this challenge here in the city of Chicago. It is no small undertaking. And I'm hoping that you are the person at this particular time to lead us into the future with saving lives here in the city of Chicago. I have a host of questions. The first, and some of my colleagues have already touched on some of the issues, so I will just touch on some of those issues, such as police reallocation. I'm the former chair of this particular committee, and for over 20 years, I have been pushing for resource reallocation here in the city of Chicago. And I believe that we need to put police where they're needed and not where they're wanted. And that is how you can help, some communities feel safer without jeopardizing the well-being of other communities. And so I've been pushing for this over the years, and everybody says, we'll look at it, but we have not taken on the challenge of reallocation. Now, I do know some of my colleagues have mentioned about realignment of beats. I don't think realignment of beats is a good idea because you lose historical data as far as those beat alignments go. And so I think the approach would be resource reallocation as far as the entire city of Chicago and the police department. So I want to know what your view is on that first.
Yes, thank you so much for the question, Alderman. I think that we need to let data be our guide. So, but also, we can't just use that as a blanket excuse not to consider being flexible. And in the ways our data collects the information so we can flag geography, density, violent crime, public disorder, to feed into our programs to give us the results that reallocate according to need. And so I want to review any and all of the ways we collect the data and the outcomes of our analysis, but also with flexibility in mind when it comes to emerging issues that may not necessarily be reflective in the way we collect the data. So I'm open, and I'm being as honest as possible to doing what it takes to reallocate appropriately, but it is my job to call balls and strikes and take the heat when people are not getting what they need. And please hold me accountable in those respects.
All right, well, I do agree that in certain aspects, when you have certain districts, the officers are working day in and day out, tirelessly, getting calls left and right. And then you have certain districts where they may respond to one, maybe two calls in an 8-hour shift. And I think that leads to a lot of the morale problems that we're facing with here in the city of Chicago, is that some of these officers are just being overworked. Mm-hmm. And so I think that appropriation of resources will help alleviate some of that and get some of the stress off of the officers that are working, because they all want to do a great job. They all want to do what's best for this entire city. But, burnout is a reality. And I think, here in the 5th district last year, actually year before last, we had 5 police officers commit suicide out of just one district. And so it was, we need to look at that. And so I know my colleague, the chairman, mentioned about the suicide rate. So I think some of that has a direct reflection on that. So I look forward to hearing what you have to do to say as far as reallocation of some of these resources.
And Alderman, let me make sure I interject. So I misunderstood the way you were referring to reallocation, but now I get what you mean. I used to characterize that as rotation of assignments, where you can have an officer in a high incident, highly violent area for far too long and need a rotation out, and someone that has not been in that high intensity assignment need to rotate in to give a relief factor. So now I fully understand what you mean by reallocation. It's more in line with rotating out of, and I have a history of doing that, recognizing that burnout. I've actually been in a position too long and got some relief through a rotation. So yes, sir, we're on the same page. I'm glad I understood you as I listened closer.
All right, not a problem. As far as the police exam, I know one of my colleagues mentioned about the police exam. The Chicago police exam, in my opinion, has been totally discriminatory against people of color. The entire process from beginning to end systematically eliminates minorities as far as getting on the force. Now, a couple of years ago, and you touched on the outreach, we had a huge outreach program to try to get minorities recruited into the police department. And, you know, a lot of the minority communities are not interested in becoming the police because of, you know, the things that's going on here in the city. And so we have to change that and change that, the morale. We must change the perception on what it means to serve and protect. And so, so we have done some of that. But when you look at the tests for the Chicago Police Department, the psychological test is a way to weed out people of color. Because you go to a panel of people, and it may just be one person evaluating you psychologically who may not understand what you deal with in your community. And if they can't relate to it, you get disqualified because you may hear gunshots once a week. And they, you know, they may say you're unstable because you're hearing gunshots once a week. Well, you don't know what these people are dealing with in these communities. And so that's one aspect. Another aspect is people get disqualified because they have bad credit. There was a gentleman that came to my office one day who had just got out of college and passed the police exam and got disqualified because he defaulted on a student loan. Well, if you don't have a job, you can't pay the student loan. If he was able to get the job, he would be able to pay that student loan, but he was disqualified from being a Chicago police officer because of a student loan debt that was defaulted on. And so I want to hear, you know, some of your ideas on how we can try to get this test straightened out to where it's equal for all.
I'm obviously being briefed on any and all these issues related to our hiring, our promotion, and our diversity. This is one area where I specifically have been briefed. What I understand, there's an appeal process on the psychological exam, but I want to dig deeper into the concern you raise. I have staff here taking notes on everything you mentioned, and I plan on looking into it. And it's not just lip service, as I've been mentioning on other subjects and topics. I take this very seriously. If we need to do something with the psychological exam to improve outcomes for minorities, we're open to looking at it and doing it. And I plan on obviously keeping the lines of communication open with you and others who have these same concerns, so I can make sure I'm being responsive to them.
I appreciate that. Also, in the 5th District, I have, in my 21 years in the City Council, have had over 10 police commanders in just the 5th District. Now, we've had some wonderful, outstanding commanders, but it seems like every time we get going on the right foot, they get moved and things get changed all over again. The CAP's office gets changed over again because every commander comes in, they want to have their own team. Case in point, you know, few of my commanders came in. We had one of the best CAP departments in the city of Chicago by far. Because there was a clash between my commander and the CAP sergeant was moved, and we have lost so much momentum in the community and so much goodwill in the community because my CAPS department is now disbanded and brought in new team members, but it was disbanded because of personality. And I think that did a disservice to the community. So how would you help intervene like that? And would you listen to some of the aldermen if we have something good going to be able to keep it, maybe over the objection of a commander, because we're trying to do what's best for the community and not just, you know, the commander?
Well, that's one of the biggest points where I have a big learning curve, figuring out all the relationships inside Chicago Police Department. It seems to be quite a web of who has the good relationships and who doesn't. And what I don't support is personality conflicts having the last say on work teams that are doing a good job, regardless of whether the alderman is saying a good job. If the outcomes are good, I'm less inclined to move people based on personalities. I think that's part of leadership, to figure it out. So I'm always going to be a listening ear to you all, to each of you, the aldermen, and to others. And I hope that you'll see that, you know, my style is, if it's working, I'm likely not to try to fix it. Now, if it's not working, that's a whole nother subject. Mm-hmm. If it's not working because of personalities, I'm likely to say you need to figure it out. That's why, we pay you the big bucks. If it's competence, yes, you get my support in getting more competent people in these districts. So I hope you understand kind of my worldview of this idea of what works. I'm actually disappointed to hear that you had that many commanders and that many have come in and out. I like this idea of stability, so that we can learn the community and not want to change people out so regularly. So you'll see a different style if that's what you've been accustomed to under my leadership.
Okay. And just two more last questions. I presented to Chief Beck as well as former Superintendent Eddie Johnson, and I've also presented a program to the mayor's office, a program that has proven to reduce crime over 40%. And it's a program that I presented that is being totally funded by corporations. A corporation has stepped forward and said they will fund this program at no cost to the Chicago Police Department. I presented this program. Everybody says it's great, we love it, but for some reason, nobody wants to implement it. Now, when I have the superintendent, Eddie Johnson was embracing it before he left. Chief Beck was briefed on it. Chief Waller was briefed on it. And so my commander embraces it. Well, I don't know about my new commander because I just got a new commander. But this is a program that has proven to reduce crime over 40% and is being funded and underwritten by corporate. And I don't understand why we can't implement a program that is proven to reduce crime by over 40%.
I think we talked about this on the phone, Alderman. I look forward to your briefing me on it, so I can have my own opinion about it. From just the brief conversations we've had, the only pushback, if any, would be how do we reallocate resources to staff it? So I need to hear your briefing and figure out if it makes sense as far as, since we just had a reorganization under Chief Beck, how do we find the staffing resources? So that's my only concern. If you've already figured that out, please share that with me as well. But I'll be asking my staff about that point to fully understand how we can make it happen.
Okay, and just as a footnote, Sheriff Tom Dart has embraced it and he's willing to throw as much manpower at this as he possibly can, but it has to be a city initiative with partners in order to make it work.
Okay, I'm willing and ready to look at it.
Okay, lastly, when we talk about retaliation as far as gang activity, we know that that's probably majority of gang crossfire is retaliation.
Right.
Now, the city of Chicago used to have a saturation team, which was a team of highly motivated, highly trained young officers who were extremely aggressive. And when we knew we had gang activity based on the data, that saturation team would be dispatched and would come in to, kind of calm the activity from the retaliation standpoint. It was successful. Some people didn't like it because they thought it was maybe too aggressive, but I think it was a good program. And it might be something that you can look at to tweak to basically calm the gang conflicts that go back and forth on a given day. So just wanted to hear your opinion on that.
Yes, if you look at the model that the reorganization, it's a Los Angeles PD model. Many departments, including Dallas, follow the same model where we push resources to the districts. When I talked to Charlie Beck before he headed back to La La Land, he mentioned that was a component that would be a later feature, will be the centralized group that went all over the city that he just wasn't able to complete given the short time he was here. But I plan on pursuing that when the time is appropriate. And as soon as we're able to figure out the staffing models to create that citywide group, while also understanding the previous conversation, these groups sometimes can get overly aggressive and get themselves in trouble without the strong supervision that's needed. And the rotation feature of getting these people in and out of that assignment. And I like another feature of this.
I got another meeting, man.
help these folks stay on the right path as they pursue these aggressive deployments is to have a day of community policing, like a community project, to keep them sensitized to the good folks in the community, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, well, Chief Brown, I look forward to working with you. I'm very encouraged. I think the mayor made a very good pick in selecting you to lead the department, and we're going to embrace you. And we're going to make you a Chicagoan before it's all over. And we look forward to just working with you because we all need your help and your support in making our community a better place to live and play. So thank you so much and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Beale. Alderman Moore, followed by Alderman Waguespack.
All right, do you hear me?
I can hear you, Alderman Moore.
All right, thank you. And good afternoon, Chief Brown. First of all, I want to commend the police board under the leadership of Gian Foreman and that team for having a selection process that definitely included you, and then thank the mayor for her choice here. And I think it's a good choice. First of all, I'm gonna make this statement and then I ask the questions. Two statements. One, Chairman Chris Taliaferro touched on it, and that's the merit program. Just so he won't be, you think he's the only voice out there on this issue. It is a critical issue for our community. You don't have to address it because you talked about it already, but I just want to let you know it's critical because I get calls, and as other aldermen, some I'm sure get called from police officers who's trying to make it up the ranks, and they feel like sometimes that through sometimes discrimination or other things that opportunity isn't there. So I appreciate your comments on it. You don't have to state anything else about it, but I just want to let you know it's very important to us. So I'm sure other aldermen may chime in as well. And as well as on Alderman Beale's point of the saturation team, I just remember from before becoming alderman, well, working as the B facilitator and working as a precinct captain, how that saturation team benefited us definitely in the late 90s, early 2000s. So that's critical as well. So from a questions standpoint, I want to get to the point where you served as an assistant city manager or a deputy city manager, which I'm happy about that because it gives you a view of what city officials are dealing with. And so one of the things that I see sometimes, and I know other aldermen can attest to it, as aldermen, we're definitely on the ground, but we sometimes just see a lot of officers drive by what I call potential crime scenes or crime scenes, whether it's them selling loose squares or whether they're selling or drinking alcohol out, and officers just, sometimes drive by. I think commanders are doing their best, but I think there's got to be a really top-down approach to this to encourage officers, even though if you didn't get that call, you have to stop. And that'll help clean up some of the activity, especially because sometimes when you think people are just gathering around, that gathering around can lead to a shooting. And if I know, and elected officials, as you probably, not elected officials, but at least you were a city manager, I don't know if that was an elected or appointed position, but you saw where there was issues, just like, wait, you guys can take care of this. So how would you address that? Because I know, like in other communities, we say communities of affluence, those things weren't happening. If they drove by and they was hanging out, trust me, son, I know. So we constantly hear, well, we can't arrest ourselves after this situation, but it's getting taken care of in other neighborhoods. And we're having problems with that both on the south and west side. So I wanted you to talk to that as well.
Yes, thank you so much for the question, Alderman. I agree wholeheartedly with you. Officers should stop when they see congregating and trouble brewing, and particularly when they see, minor crimes happening to prevent the further violence. So one of the sentiments that I try to express to police leadership is behavior reflects leaderships. Behavior reflects leadership. So I need to drive the neighborhood and get out of the car. And then I'm looking at my commanders. If I'm getting out of the car, you better be getting out of the car. And my commander should be looking at the lieutenants getting out of the car. And now you're at the level where you have an impact. Sergeants and officers now have this example of leadership getting out of the car, interacting with people, and their behavior will reflect your leadership, if that makes sense.
Yes.
If we spend all our time in our offices and never get out of the office and never get in a neighborhood, we're never seen getting out of the car, how can we expect their behavior to reflect something different than what we're doing? So I like to lead from the front and show people in the organization what I expect. And that's what you all will be seeing.
A New York Times article, I don't remember the date. It said that one of the things that you did in Dallas, you discouraged car chases and even some cases foot chase. If that's to be true, and I know sometimes that's a safety issue, if whether it's thieves, a shooting, or people, especially getting close to expressways or certain streets, and they know that you're going to call off the chase, how are we handling that? Because a lot of people are using cars, I believe, to shoot and commit crimes, and then they run because they are aware of that those chases are going to be called off. So in that New York Times article that stated that about you, how did, since if you called it off, both car chasing and if you can talk to foot chasing, because I got to understand that foot chasing piece as well, then how do we then pursue? I mean, what other mechanisms do we use? Because if people keep getting away because they know, hey, he's not going to chase in the car. I have never heard of the foot piece that was in the New York Times article. So can you elaborate on those?
Sure, yeah. So the foot pursuit policy and our vehicle pursuit policy were put in place to mitigate our large sums of payouts in settlements. We found that there was data to support that we should pursue when it's a violent felon, but low-level pursuits for traffic violations didn't support the benefit analysis. And we were losing large sums. I think Chicago has this experience as well. And so we put in a policy where you could pursue violent felons, and then we put in a foot pursuit policy where we didn't want officers running off one officer alone after one or two suspects without giving their location. So we required them to do it in a safe manner. And here's how you catch people if you have those policies in place. You utilize a tactical apprehension that get on the police radio, call in the police helicopter, get other officers that square off that area where these people are running, where you surround them and capture them. Be smarter about it. And we continue to collect data as we put these features in place. And we found that we continue to reduce crime in those areas where we were more restrictive in our policies, and yet we paid out less because we were putting these policies into accidents and misconduct, while at the same time being smarter on crime and capturing suspects in a tactical apprehension where we use cover, helicopters, and technology with cameras to apprehend these people.
Okay. Now, you're definitely lauded for community policing, bringing the community together in the community engagement, which I'm big on, and many of us are, and that's great. But I also read something where the unions criticize your methods and implementation of the policies. Can you help us understand, because sometimes the union is overly critical, and I want to understand what methods or policies were they criticizing that you implemented?
So I took on the reforming the police department before reform was popular. All the things you all have been ordered to do here in Chicago with the consent decree, I read consent decrees and I implemented those policies before we were ordered. And I also implemented really aggressive community policing before we were ordered to do it. And I did that because it was the right thing to do. That's why I did it. But it was with great opposition from traditional policing folks. They opposed it, and it was it was opposition that was very vocal from not just unions and from others. But that's why I truly define ethics as what you do when no one's looking. It's doing the right thing when not being ordered. That's true ethics. And it's more the spirit of consent decrees than just the letter of a consent decree.
Absolutely.
Where you truly, authentically believe in doing the right thing. And that's what I stand on. And I'm really proud of how we did that. And I say we did that in during my tenure in Dallas.
You sound like a true David with that statement. The FBI National Academy, was it just a 6-week course, or was it the actual academy that you went through? And how did that benefit you, and how do you apply the things you learned there to your position currently?
So yes, I'm a graduate of the FBI National Academy. It is a training program for police officers, specifically as part of their professional development. Chicago currently has 4 slots each year. It is 3 months long. So it's a long-term program, but it's one where you get training in leadership, budget, media, and strategies. It is a best-in-class training program that I hope to try to get more slots for Chicago, because we want to develop our deep bench. Senior Management Institute for Police is another at Boston University that I plan on continue as part of the professional development program. And I think there are schools here at local universities. We need to develop a deep bench. We need to have people in line to take on the leadership of this department.
Absolutely.
So that you can have Chicagoans inside the department as your superintendent. So I plan on taking that on as one of my top priorities, developing a deep bench, and the FBI National Academy is one of those opportunities I think we ought to take advantage of.
All right, well, thank you, and thank you, Chairman. And with a name like David, and also a Cowboy fan, you are totally all right with me. So I look forward to supporting this recommendation by the mayor. Thank you.
By the way, to be quite honest, my dad was a big Gale Sayers fan, so I've got it somewhere in my DNA. We're here in Chicago.
We all are big Gale Sayers fans and 85 Bears fans.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alderman Moore. Alderman Sposato, followed by Alderman Waguespack.
Sorry, I just took myself off of mute. I turn my volume up here. Sorry. Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Acting Superintendent, there's just one thing I want to say, and I'm not looking to pick a fight with any of my colleagues. I love 49 of the 50 of them, so I only have a problem with one alderman. That same guy has a problem with me, but that's all right. I thought our relationship was patched up, but it wasn't. But anyways, I can assure you, Acting Soup Brown, that there's no districts where policemen have 1 or 2 runs a day, 1 or 2 calls a day. My district that will represent 100% of the 38th ward, 100% of the 41st ward, about 75, 80% of the 45th ward, and then it has 5 other aldermen that I represent. It is 28.2 square miles. So our beats in our district are 2 square miles. So we're not 4 square blocks like some districts, they're 2 square miles. So you all need help. We all want help. We'll all keep beating you up. I do agree with the fact that there is a big problem with the hiring process. We have people that have been disqualified, and you cannot appeal until you get a letter of disqualification from them. And you literally have probably thousands of disqualifications sitting in a pile somewhere. So we need to get these disqualifications out to these candidates as fast as possible so they can go through the appeal process. But with that, once again, thank you. You have my full support and anything you need. And we look forward to seeing you right in the 16th district. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Alderman Sposato. Alderman Waguespack, followed by Alderman Cappleman.
Thank you, Chairman. You know, looking at the Chief Brown, just thank you for taking all this time today, and we appreciate you answering all these questions. And Chairman, thanks for putting this together. First of all, you know, when we look at reforms in police departments nationwide, there's a long list of policies that I think we need in our toolkits to start changing the way we reform police departments. But one of the issues that we've had over the last several years was the information or data that went out to the public, information or data that went out to the aldermen to make policy decisions. So for instance, the Chicago UCR data that goes to the federal government was never posted on the police website for about 7 years, from 2011 to 2018. It was very difficult to make some policy decisions based on the lack of that data. One of the former superintendents made a comment a few years back that citizens' perception of crime wasn't based on reality of the crime. And we often would see data dumps of information that would say we're doing great in terms of crime reduction, using very narrow bands of information, but also very narrow bands of time width. 1 week you could say certain burglaries are down or thefts were down, but then if you looked at a broader picture of what happened over a month or a summer, it painted a much different picture. And I think every chief or superintendent's gone through this with the issues of CompStat and how we classify crimes. I think you've had that experience as well in Dallas. And I've, just reading back through different, doing research on what you've gone through and then looking back at what we've gone through here. How would you pair up and look back and try to create more integrity within Chicago's data information sharing with what will soon be our citizen watchdog, whether it's GAP or somebody else, or with the aldermen who are tasked with creating these policies?
Good question, Alderman. Thank you so much. Yeah, I had extensive experience with crime data and other police data and making it public. That's been my forte. I think transparency builds trust across communities. I'm a little bit of a nerd. I don't wear these glasses just for style. So I collected all of the crime data we had published in Dallas as far back as we had accurate data. So that ended up being back to 1930. And we published that data for each of the years. I feel that data tells a story about your city, about your police department, if you can gather it as far back as possible. During the process of interviewing for this job, I collected the data as far back as I could find as an outsider. It was back to 1985. All of your UCR crime data, which told me a story about a lot of categories, not just your violent crime. That information is actually public record. So it's not anything that should be kept secret in any way. It's a public record once you submit. The second feature I think is really important as well that I sought to do is you got to have your data audited by independent parties. So we requested that our state audit our not only accuracy of our data, but also the methodology we use to report our data. And then we asked our inside auditor in the city to audit that data. I think that would be similar to your IG office to make sure we're doing everything accurate and the methodologies are consistent. So I don't know why that wouldn't be done here. That's actually helpful in our deployment strategies and our crime fighting efforts and our community policing efforts. It's statistical, of course, and it can get really nerdy, but it does speak to the perception problems. I think it can, if you're transparent about it, I think it can alleviate some perceptions. Or it can inspire you to achieve if you have significant challenges in your crime fighting. So there's just no bad way to be transparent. It's always good. Just be transparent. I always like to admit the obvious. That's so easy. Just admit the obvious, and then let's build relationships going forward.
And I appreciate that. And when you talk about how we're going to use that data and transparency as well, so we have a PSIG Public Safety Inspector General. We have a new person that'll be coming in there pretty soon. We've had a lot of turnover over the last several years as we've had the consent decree. So we've had different superintendents come in, and then the sort of the watchdog. How do you see your role working with all the different agencies, the different internal auditors, and maybe even working with external auditors, people who spend their lifetime looking at this data? They help write reports like the Department of Justice report for the executives from 2013, groups like Local Progress. There's organizations all across the US and especially in Chicago. Would you work, are you going to work collaboratively as I think you will? And then how do you sort of envision that?
So again, you took the words right out of my mouth. I believe in collaboration. I think it's the force multiplier to any and everything you're trying to accomplish. Where it makes sense, work in partnership, where the partnership maybe needs to have some independence, try to work in collaboration. I think the independence of some of these groups you mentioned, it makes sense to stay independent so that you have a true third-party review and not tainted by the internal partnership. So it's not one size fits all. I think each group has an important role to play, but I think there's always room for collaboration.
Okay. Well, I had about 20 other questions. I think I can send them to your,
please
do it through future meetings, but I appreciate you coming on again today, and I wish you good luck. And Chairman, that's all the questions I had. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderman Waguespack. We next have Alderman Cappleman, followed by Alderman Coleman, then Villegas. Alderman Cappleman.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Superintendent. I'll try to keep it short because you've been here a long time already. There are, in all our 22 police districts, there are a set number of people who get arrested over and over and over again. I can recall one person in the 19th district who's had over 400 arrests. She has untreated bipolar disease and she has ongoing addictions. I recently saw her, actually I saw a police officer giving her an ANOF, a notice of violation. She took the notice, turned around, tore it up, and then pulled a beer out of her coat pocket and continued drinking. The police were frustrated, the community's frustrated, and I'm sure this person living with mental illness is also extraordinarily frustrated because her life is a shambles. What's been your experience working with other city departments to address issues of these individuals who keep cycling through our jail system and keep cycling through the ER system?
So this is another wheelhouse of mine where really my last act as police chief in Dallas was to create a right care program where law enforcement took on a supportive role when dealing with high users of emergency rooms, hospitals, and high users of the 911 system, arrests, all the things you mentioned. And we partnered with our hospitals because they had a significant expense when high users come to the emergency room over and over and over again. And they saw a way to save money by being more front facing in response to these calls for service to these incidents where people are just constantly cycling through, being arrested, going to ER, going to jail. And what some of the simple solutions were to hotspot police it, but have psychiatrists, psychologists be both in your 911 center and also on call to these high risk, high users of these systems, not when the 911 call happens, but throughout, to make sure they're on their meds, to make sure they're going to their counseling sessions. The cops were there as support, make sure nothing happened to harm our medical professionals, but the results were significant. And you know, one size doesn't fit all, again, like I've been saying with these types of programs, but we hope to bring something similar to Chicago so that we can have a better outcome. Law enforcement should not be the social service of last resort for people struggling with mental health. The medical community can very well handle, in a smart way, dealing with these high users, especially to reduce our incidence of, you know, physical altercations with these folks, and actually make our community safer in the way that we're dealing with these people who in need, but for quality health care.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You have my full support.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Cappleman. Alderman Coleman, followed by Alderman Villegas, then Hairston. The chair recognizes Alderman Coleman.
Thank you, Chairman Taliaferro. And to Chief Brown, thank you so much for reaching out on last week. I know you are practicing, you and your wife are healthy eating, but I'm sure that when you decide on having some fried chicken, you will choose the South Side at Harold's versus Uncle Remus on the West Side. Just have to put that out there to my West Side colleagues. But again, Chief, you understand my sentiments about 7th District and just how Herculean of a job that Commander Snelling and before him Commander Robinson and with community policing. And the numbers reflect that once officers are out on the street and CAPS is really have that investment and, you know, crime goes down. And they're really rebuilding the trust with residents. And I hope that you and I will work together with 8th and 9th District so that we have that communication and that partnership. Because it is a challenge, as I've shared with you, even with communication and with the language barriers in representing our Latino constituents. But I wanted to ask about the mental health. You've talked about caring for residents as well as officers, and suicide numbers for those officers have increased. And just wondering your thoughts on having a mental health professional. Not only there's so many undiagnosed mental health cases that are walking in our communities and on the department and probably on this call, but what are your thoughts and sentiments about addressing the mental health and those undiagnosed cases, because it's so many and it's so prevalent in our community, especially on the South and West Side. Sometimes it you know, things that are going on in people's psyche, you know, reflects on their actions. So I just wanted to know your thoughts on that.
Sure, I'm glad you brought this point up. I think there are some significant opportunities here to create access to quality mental health care, because that's what we're really talking about. There's usually this barrier to access, particularly for people of color, that we're finding even with the pandemic, where we're seeing the impacts of not having quality access to healthcare impacts people of color much more than others. And so this idea of utilizing technology, like the Zoom meeting we have now, you know, telehealth is an emerging, very, very high quality way to overcome access to mental health. There's telepsychiatry that's being utilized throughout the country, even before the pandemic, in very positive ways. I really want to explore this idea with the mental health professionals here in the city of Chicago to see if we can pilot a program in one of our areas that struggles with access to quality healthcare and get maybe some quality access to mental health care. It's just a matter of having a tablet or a phone and Wi-Fi to create this dynamic. I mean, much like we're understanding with the Zoom meeting, this can be done also in the healthcare environment. So I really like to work with you and others that have this advocacy in their heart to see if we can create a pilot program that then we can embrace and expand if we like it.
Thank you. I'm sure Chairman Sawyer and the Health and Human Relations Committee will definitely be interested and finding some solutions and, you know, piloting, you know, some satellite locations on the south and west side. And last question, the chief administrator of COPA, have you been in communication or have you touched on that office yet?
I believe we talked to all the groups. Did we talk to COPA? We hadn't talked to COPA yet.
Okay.
That's on my list. It's on my list to do.
Okay. I know you're getting acclimated with all of the, you know, the offices, but just wondering when you do, if you can kind of keep this on your mind and working with the investigations of the police misconduct, specifically conducted by the civilian administrations who receive those complaints, because I believe there were 2,000 complaints from last year, and we want to make sure that they don't fall on deaf ears, and how we can work with COPA, a great resource in addressing those civilian complaints by, you know, by the community members.
Okay, I will. And thank you for the dinner invitation. I'll be glad to take you up on it on one of my cheat days.
Absolutely. We're going to take you to the one, I think, on 87th Street. Or 75th. 75th is right here.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Coleman. And just as a reminder as well, as part of, you know, an ordinance passed by this body, COPA does have to appear before the Committee on Public Safety on a quarterly basis to discuss statistics and their cases, not the details of the cases, but the details of the statistics regarding the cases. So I look forward to seeing you on when we do get back into the swing of things. We can definitely make sure we have that hearing with COPA, and of course, Superintendent, you're more than welcome at that meeting as well. Alderman Villegas, followed by Alderman Hairston, then Vasquez. Alderman Villegas. Alderman Villegas is, okay, we'll move to Alderman Hairston. If Alderman Villegas comes back on, we'll make sure we hear him. Alderman Hairston.
You have to, oh, okay. Good afternoon.
Hello, Alderman Hairston.
Acting Superintendent Brown, I would just like to say I like your comments and your responses so far. And I hope that you will continue to be true to yourself. I hope that you don't lose your independence, because I think you are up to the task, and I'd like to see you successful at it. I like your new approaches to gun violence and prevention, and I think that's what we need. We need some new blood. Our CAPS programs are suffering in attendance. There's not much interest. We've had to put beats together, and you still don't have the type of participation that we need. Do you have any plans for reassessing the district levels? I know some of them are a level 1 district or a level 2 district, and that directly ties into the resources and the services that certain communities get or don't get.
Yes, ma'am. I am reassessing as we speak, evaluating everything we're doing in CAPS. I really like the district coordination officers, figuring out ways to expand that from just 2 districts to all districts. And again, I think being innovative and creative in my interactions with you and your constituents, I think will be helpful in customizing how we do CAPS and district coordination and overall community policing is going to be really important. So I've got a clean slate. I'm looking at everything fresh. I don't owe anybody. I'm coming in with
that is
no
so
agenda.
Wonderful to hear. That is so
no
wonderful.
agenda. I don't have an agenda. So I'm open to listening to you, and I'm really sincere about it.
And I am here to help you. I think that it is important. I too, like Alderman Beale, have been here for 21 years and am probably on my 9th or 10th in the 3rd district. I'm not sure where we are in our 2nd district, and we surely have had a lot in the 4th district. You know, so when we talk about, you know, working with the community, it's important that we have some stability there because it impacts the quality of life. You know, I know a lot of my other colleagues had talked about, you know, loitering and drug dealing in the same places over the year. There is no reason why we cannot solve those. And I am asking for your assistance in doing that. There is another thing that I'd like you to look at, and you talk about being a data person, and I understand that. But sometimes the data does not give you the information that you need. And for example, I want to point to the police department relying on calls for service as being a guide for what's really going on. And in a lot of our communities, particularly in the African-American community, where there is no trust with the police, they're not calling 911. It does not mean that crime is not happening. Right. So I'd like to hear about your approach to that.
Yeah, I like to put in a feature of flexibility when I look at data, and I really understand the weighted percentages we're putting on calls versus public disorder that may not necessarily be captured versus crime, you know, and then versus input from the community. So I like to add a feature of surveying the community about what's happening and do that on a regular basis. And sometimes those surveys can be an eye opener. You're missing so much, but you got to build relationships. People want to be able to survey. You know, some people, just like they won't call police, they won't interact with you in a survey instrument to convey their thoughts and concerns.
Well, I've got communities that will interact. They will give you their opinions. And, you know, one of the other things I think when we're looking at the whole thing, we need to look at civility with police and the citizens. And that's a training issue. You know, there is a disrespect there, and that often escalates a situation unnecessarily. So are there any plans to include that in the training that you talk about?
Yes, ma'am. I hope to bring implicit bias training to the Chicago Police Department. And what you said is really on point. Explicit bias, people who are just disrespectful, that's easy, low-hanging fruit to correct. Got to be stern with officers and make them understand that's a zero tolerance for disrespecting people. But oftentimes, it's implicit, where there's a feature of maybe a cultural disconnect or understanding where implicit bias can really be helpful to our officers in understanding the uniqueness of different cultures and the way they communicate, and what may come across in one community as okay is considered in another community disrespectful, if that makes sense.
That makes perfectly good sense. And I hope that you are performing an independent analysis of the department. We can switch the head. We can get a new superintendent every year, but if we don't fix what's wrong at the root, we're never going to get it. And so I appreciate you know, your independence, and I hope again you will do an analysis of the whole department. And I think last, I want to talk about the homicide clearance rate. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to me a little about that, how you plan to improve it, because it is very low?
There's two aspects of the homicide clearance rate that I hope to have an impact on. One, I think building trust will be helpful in building a relationship where people feel comfortable coming forward and giving up information about what happened on a homicide. You know, when you have low trust, people don't come forward. They know what happened, but will never say. But also, secondly, I think the professional development program I hope to create here as relates to our investigators and get them to the right schools, creating a vetting process of how you go from detective, say property crime detective, to homicide detective. There ought to be some steps, there ought to be some vetting, there ought to be significant training. You ought to have to prove yourself in property crimes, then go to assaults, then go to robbery, then make your way. The best of the best ought to be in homicide, not skipping any step, because the benefits are so high when a detective have gone through all the steps and now becomes a proud homicide detective. So those things ought to be put in place sooner rather than later. I hope to be part of moving that process. The consent decree helps us in some of these areas of training. And so I just want to be, again, open communication with you all about this, and you feel free to be open and honest with me.
I will be open and honest with you, and I will be at your door. So I would like to thank you, and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Alderman Hairston. And I think, Superintendent, just to add on that, I appreciate Alderman Hairston bringing up the point about the homicide clearance rate. You know, statistically, and this is has been a big thing in the past year in our local media, with perhaps the inclination that the statistics have been manipulated to some degree. But this body did just pass a few months ago an ordinance that requires the chief of detectives and her representatives to appear before this body and discuss those numbers and figures with this committee. So I look forward to working with you on that as well.
Can I just chime in on this area, because I know it's been a stickler point, and I've been trying to just answer the question. I think it's an opportunity for me to describe, you know, there's two areas of this, and I know there's been some media coverage of how we calculate our clearance rate. So there's an administrative clearance rate methodology calculation that's standardized through Uniform Crime Report that's given to the FBI. We follow that. But there's also some operational statistical calculations that we use in addition to the administrative standardized report from FBI UCR that we use that's annualized to give us a real-time look. And so we need to really talk about that much more than we have, so we don't have the narrative that we're cooking the books in any way. And I hope to be helpful in this area of narrative about the administrative standardized FBI UCR clearance rate calculation versus our internal real-time calculation that we utilize for operational purposes. Those two are separate and apart. And if we can just get that audited and discussed openly by independent third parties and the public safety body and the full council body, I think the better off we'll be.
Thank you, Superintendent. I do agree with you on that. The methodology used by the media could be quite different than what's used by the department. Alderman Vasquez, followed by Alderman Burke, then Alderman King.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, Chief David Brown, for really enduring the bit of a interview marathon we've got going on here. I really want to commend the mayor on the decision of asking for your appointment. I think in looking at the candidates as they were being presented, you were presented as kind of like the most progressive or the lefty of the group, and that made you a little bit of my favorite in thinking about really the approach to what justice looks like, right? I believe that the work that the officers do is extremely important. I think we could see that especially during this time of crisis that we're in. So your approach of really championing what that goal of justice is and really being able to show that through the department is something that really speaks to me, and I appreciate it. What I wanted to ask is a couple of questions about, you having that perspective and your life experiences, how that's led you to look at it a certain way. There are certain, I guess, requirements or rules in place about officers living in the communities where they police, where typically it's not the case that they do that. And I believe sometimes it creates the dynamic where people view the areas they police as somewhat enemy territory, or there's a disconnect from the actual community in the time where we want to create more bridges. So I wanted to know what your take was on an officer's living in places they police, or your stance on that.
Oh, we require them to live in the city. My experience is that we didn't actually have that requirement, and it was prohibitive to put those laws in place in the Dallas area. I'm supportive of living in the city. I plan on, I was house hunting over the weekend. I think not only that, living in the city, it's where are you hiring officers from is as important, if not more important, in their experiences in communities that's representative of your city. And I like where your training continues to immerse people in your communities, very unique, diverse communities where they never have that disconnect, regardless of their assignments from the community. So it's not just living there, but it's also, how is your hiring reflective of the experiences that you want officers to have about your communities. So I see it both as two very different ways to look at it. That's both important.
Absolutely. I think it also speaks to some points that Alderman Beale had before about the hiring practices to make sure we bring in people from those communities. Because like with all testing, right, there may be some bias that doesn't help what we actually want to accomplish. Another question I had kind of along those lines is around the stay-at-home order. So, what we've heard about, I've read stories about how in certain sides of town, we've had like allegedly a commander who's requiring people to show ID to show up on a block, or curfew enforcements on sides of town. Whereas the side of town where I'm at, you end up having sometimes the opposite. You end up having a lot of congregation, which puts people at risk. And in my ward, one of the zip codes is one of the highest in the city as a result. So how do you kind of balance that line? And what do you view enforcement as in a situation like this, where you want people not to congregate, but do so in a way that still respects their civil rights, while making sure that those that kind of abuse it are being held accountable as well?
So let me just say, first of all, correct the record. The way that's characterized, the commander directed checking license plate, that's just not how it happened. The department used that as a strategy, and this commander was just following the instructions of the leadership.
Thank you.
Number one, let's correct that. Number two, we do see, doing whatever strategy we can, whatever mission or operation, whatever you want to call it, to get people to abide by the guidance as it relates to the pandemic. We see that as saving lives. It's an operation of saving lives, that if congregating outside of the direction of the guidance from health professionals can increase the incidence of COVID-19, we need to do all we can to disperse those congregating to save lives. But we need to also do it, to your point, in a constitutional way. And if we're going to keeping with our theme of constitutional policing, and we're doing that. And I'm looking at that every day since being put in the acting role. And if confirmed, I'll make sure we do any and all operations in a constitutional way, so that we can, number one, save lives and respect our rights as residents of this great city.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. I do believe that, right? When I talk to the officers, I do believe they're all trying their best to do it. I think the concern that I have is some of it ends up being a little subject to interpretation. And what I mean by that is, like, and officers have a lot going on. So sometimes they may be a little more lax with some of them, but and we've seen that dynamic plays out differently in a city that's as segregated as ours is, right? So I appreciate that the constitutionality is what'll be enforced, but how would you kind of address the fact that, like, maybe they are a little more relaxed up on, like, our side of town, and how do you have those conversations to kind of get the culture to be in line and equitable across the city?
Right. So I think the mayor brought this up while I was being considered as the acting, I think the week before, where we looked at dispersals and everything wasn't being done equal. And we made adjustments. And I get a report every day on where we're having dispersals, where we're writing citations, where we're writing arrests and making sure that we're not heavy-handed in one area over another, with the perception being we're doing it based on things other than saving lives.
Sure.
So I'm on top of that. Please keep raising that with me to make sure we're doing it in the right way, just in case I have some blind spots. But I want to look at it across the city to make sure we're not being, or that we are being respectful of people's rights, and we're doing it in a way that saves lives as the focus and the only focus.
Definitely, I appreciate that. I've got a couple more questions. So in reading kind of your I'd say zero tolerance stance on, let's say, officers that would be the ones that are violating the law themselves, right? There's history of you saying, you know what, it's clear cut. If they did something wrong, they're out, because it adds to the integrity of the force in being one that's about justice. So this one, obviously you're coming in new. So I was wondering if you had looked at what protections there are in place in Chicago when it comes to officers who want to call out other officers in comparison to what it had been in Dallas. And if there's things that would help you be in a better position to make sure that the officers that are doing the amazing job all the time, that are risking their lives, aren't having their work and their safety undermined by those who can't abide by the law.
There are some differences from Dallas and the state of Texas versus Chicago and the state of Illinois in the way you approach discipline, the way you approach transparency as it relates to officers and what you want to do from a discipline standpoint. But I still think what does travel from Texas to Illinois is a high ethical standard of character that travels across states. And again, I want to repeat this, behavior often reflects leadership. What I think is important, I need to convey to officers to ensure that they understand what's really important in the way they treat people, in the way they abide by the laws they enforce. With this idea of anyone who tarnishes the badge does a disrespect to all of the officers who make sacrifices in their bravery and courage, particularly those officers that make the ultimate sacrifice and lose their lives. So if not for any other reason, we ought to ensure that bad apples are held accountable so that they don't tarnish the badge based on the officers who've made the ultimate sacrifice and given their lives for that badge.
I appreciate that.
Alderman Vasquez, before you continue, point of information, Alderman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up with Alderman Vasquez's question about the officers not allowing folks on the block without a license. So a couple things about that. One, I spoke to the commander directly because that is an 11 in the district that serves the 24th Ward. And by no means was he doing that. He was stationing folks on the block just to disperse folks, just so it looked like we had a greater presence of officers over there. And so I don't want for that to be mischaracterized. And I know that Soups spoke to it, or Interim Soup spoke to it, but I did speak to that commander directly, and they were on the block making sure that residents felt safe to come outside of their doors, because in those areas, it's an open air drug market and not people just congregating. It is where folks jump off of the highway, get their wares and then get back on the highway. And so in to protect the residents in the 24th, 28th, I think 37 is close as well. We wanted to make sure that was the case. And then my last point of information is for Alderman Coleman, and that is the Heralds is not better than Uncle Remus. Thank you.
Point of information, Alderman Lopez.
Thank you, Chairman. And for the record, Heralds, just want to put that out there. But I do want to.
Thank you, Alderman Lopez.
Y'all making me hungry. Y'all making me hungry.
We already had this food. We already had this food discussion, Chief. But I actually do have a point of information, and it's regarding what Alderman Vasquez brought up, which was, I know you mentioned the constitutionality and the equal distribution of force as it relates to the shelter in place and things of that nature. But it's come to my attention, at least in my districts, from a number of officers as well, that police are being encouraged not to engage with the public. not to make arrests and not to bring anyone to the station at pretty much at all costs, to avoid any kind of public interaction. And for the district that are in my ward and on the south side, and that are some of the most highly active districts in the city, that can pose a problem. And I just want to see, is that correct what we're hearing? Because it's not just a matter of are people being allowed to congregate versus not congregate, but you're now turning the city in certain neighborhoods over to the gang members who are running wild because they know that they're not going to be engaged by the police or arrested by the police because of the orders that they're hearing at roll calls. So I'd like to know, is that the policy that's going on now?
So we care about our cops.
Well, so do we.
And we're concerned. Yes, I know you do. And we're concerned about their exposure to the COVID virus when we ask them to do their job. So we are focused on violent crime offenders, gangs, guns, and drugs, and people, places, and behavior that contribute to violent crime. But we're also at the same time being smart about limiting the officers' exposures when it relates to low-level crimes. And we're just doing a cost-benefit analysis, but these officers are going home and exposing their wives and kids and fathers and mothers to what they are experiencing in their interactions. And so we're just trying to be smart. We're trying to care for our officers. And the exposures we have, we continuing to have our officers exposed and test positive. Of course, Officer Newman just passed from COVID-19, our third officer. And so we're trying to be smart, we're trying to be caring, we're trying to be understanding. And if you're hearing that they're being told not to enforce crime, that's likely the wrong message. It's not what we intend on the messaging being, but we are being careful in how we do our job. We want them to wash their hands and wear their mask and be careful so that we don't lose more cops or that we don't lose members of our police officers' families. So I hope that explains how careful we're trying to be. And please understand this, these are some brave, courageous people who run toward danger as their default reactions. And we just want them to be smart. We know what they want to do. We just want them to be smart. We want to do everything we can to save our first responders' lives, everything we can, while at the same time protecting the public from violence.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Superintendent, and thank you, Alderman Lopez. Alderman Vasquez, you can go ahead and continue.
Thank you. I'm really glad that my colleagues brought to light some really serious issues that we kind of struggle with. And I'm glad we were able to determine that Harold's is in fact the best chicken in the city. So I thank you for that. Well, much respect. So kind of off the last question we had last, you mentioned that there were differences between Dallas and Chicago as it pertains to the protections for an officer who would want to report another officer doing activity that would be considered, that would be illegal. Through the chair, would you be able to at some point provide recommendations on what you would change about Chicago in comparison that would make it better? So that's a simple, just if you can do that to the chair, I'd appreciate just to kind of get an idea on what things we can work and help with.
Sure, I don't mind talking offline about it, sure. I'll be glad to help.
Awesome, I appreciate that. I would not be on brand if I didn't ask a question about this. Now that cannabis is legal in Illinois, what is your take on really how that affects the role of the officers? And we know obviously the city's done a really good job of making sure that we understood the dynamics in place, but compared to Dallas and your experience, what is your take on all of it?
So one of the things I want to make sure, because I studied this as states across the country began to legalize marijuana to different degrees. The fact that most states started out not considering this had to be a cash business where you subject these small businesses to robberies because they were keeping large sums of cash on the premise. So they had to work with law enforcement to figure out how we create some safety features as it relates to increase in robberies of cannabis shops. Secondly, I think that the nuances of the law, where you can smoke in public spaces, is something we all need to work through and understand. Exactly. What are we asking our cops to do as it relates to certain restrictions that are municipal restrictions. Even though it's a state law, there's some municipal restrictions that we need to fully understand so we can be helpful to our cops and understand what to enforce and what not to enforce. So I think there's some go forward things we could do together. I'm curious to work with you all on the ideas you have, given just those two aspects of it. And I'm really looking forward to working with you on it.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I think that'll be it for mine, but I really wanted to commend you on really the thoughtful approach you have to the role and really thinking about how to holistically improve the force through so many different angles. And so thank you very much for that. And I look forward to supporting you. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Vasquez. Alderman Burke, followed by Alderman King, then Alderman Ervin. The chair recognizes Alderman Burke. Alderman Burke. Alderman King. Is Alderman King?
Me? Yeah.
Yes, Alderman King, we can hear you.
There. So thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chief Acting Superintendent Brown, for your, I would say, very thoughtful answers. I've learned a lot just listening, and a lot of my questions have been answered. Just want to emphasize, some of your responses around clearance rates. Would love to, talk with you more about that offline. I guess what I'd like to do with my time is just follow up on what I would consider maybe cultural apathy, and how police and how we kind of hold them accountable, and maybe some of the lessons you've learned. For instance, I have a very diverse ward, two very distinct police districts, one that goes to downtown, which is the first district, and one the second district that goes, from Bronzeville to Hyde Park. And, what I've noticed is different types of reactions by police to some of the same type of incidents. And so I break that down perhaps to culture, to apathy, perhaps, or, something that's more ingrained on how we follow up to different types of incidents. And so, one example, just to give you, some clarity around that is, we had a shooting. Nobody was shot, but nobody was hit, let's just say, but 40 rounds were dispensed. And part of the follow-up was just going to be, well, thank God nobody was shot, which, we were happy. But, really there was not going to be any follow-up to look at video, to ascertain, who the offenders were. And, I just felt that obviously wasn't a great approach, and insisted, and with, the superintendents and the mayor's help, actually, there was an offender that caught. But to that end, how do we change that? How do we use data? How do we use, whatever tools that we have to change what I would consider, maybe that's more culture.
Yes, Alderman, thank you so much for raising that idea. What I think will work best for incidents like that is that you immediately bring those forward when they happen, right away. Don't let any time pass so we can address it and hold people accountable. Because the longer ways it is from the actual incident, you hate given an opportunity to change behavior. Right. And really, we need those opportunities to change behavior immediately, because that's the most effective way to change the culture, is that you get these examples immediately, because you have these open and honest lines of communication where aldermen and others feel free to be honest with us about corrective actions that need to be taking place. Of course, we're going to verify the facts, and maybe there's a more than one version of, the officer may say, oh, well, I have a whatever excuse, but at least it's an immediate response. And I tell you what, that word passes quickly in the police culture on what will be tolerated and what won't be tolerated. But you'd have to give us that opportunity to address them immediately. Those are the best ways I've seen culture change, is that we have an immediate, instant reaction to when cops do things that we don't want them to do.
No, I definitely would agree with that. And also just mentioning that, perhaps change, how that's reported out. Just because nobody's hit in an incident doesn't mean there wasn't the potential for it to be a mass, murder, what have you. So that's part of it. Again, I thank you for our one-on-one conversation. I look forward to that. I agree with my colleague that, you need to get around and understand the different communities. I think that'll be helpful in helping you make some probably very tough decisions. I just wanted to also take the opportunity to thank Guillen Foreman, head of the president of the police board, for bringing you and filtering that process, as well as the mayor, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman King. Are there any other questions by committee members or council members? There being no further questions or comments, I ask that all committee members at this time take a moment to unmute your microphones. We will be entertaining, rather than a voice vote today, we will be entertaining a roll call vote. Can I get a motion to recommend the approval of
So pass.
So passed, or so moved by Alderman Michael Scott?
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you need to adopt the resolution first.
I will adopt the resolution. I apologize. Can I get a motion to accept? And thank you, Alderman Beale. Can I get a motion to accept the appointment of David Brown?
Alderman Scott.
So moved. So moved by Alderman Mitz. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. Is the appointment of David Brown as superintendent of the Chicago Police Department is now accepted into committee and before this body for vote. Again, thank you, Alderman Ervin, as well as Alderman Beale. Can I get a motion to recommend the approval?
I renew my motion, Madam Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Scott. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Chairman, is this a roll call vote, or is this?
Hold on, let me finish. All those that would be in favor of the appointment in the motion on Alderman Scott, as an aye. Those that are opposed to the appointment.
Those that are opposed.
Please say no.
Please say no. Back. Speed check.
Can't hear you.
Chris, you muted.
Chairman, we're experiencing.
Hey, Chris, unmute yourself.
It's unmuted. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I will start the roll call again. Alderman Taliaferro votes aye on the appointment of Superintendent David Brown. Vice Chair Osterman,
Votes aye.
Alderman Sawyer,
Aye.
Alderman Mitchell, Alderman Mitchell, Alderman Thompson,
Aye.
Alderman Lopez,
Aye.
Alderman Curtis, Alderman Curtis, Alderman Scott,
Aye.
Alderman Ervin,
Aye.
Alderman Reboyes,
Aye.
Alderman Mitz, Alderman Mitz,
Mitz is muted.
Oh. Unmute me.
You're okay. Alderman Curtis.
Alderman Curtis, Alderman
Votes aye.
Alderman Mitz, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Aye. Can you hear me?
I can now. Thank you, Alderman Mitz.
Thank you.
Alderman Sposato,
Aye.
Alderman Nugent, Alderman Napolitano,
Aye.
Alderman Smith,
Aye.
Alderman Tunney,
Aye.
Alderman Gardner,
Aye.
Alderman Martin,
Aye.
and Alderman Silverstein.
Aye.
There are 18 ayes, 0 nays. In the opinion of the chair, this is due pass. Recommendation of the appointment of Superintendent Brown will be appointed out at the next meeting of the body on Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020. Congratulations, Acting Superintendent Brown. Before we close, let me take a quick opportunity to thank the technical support staff that's with us today, as well as IGA and the superintendent. Thank you for your time and effort before the body today. We really appreciate your answering your question. You're being very frank with us, as well as we look forward to the accessibility that you will have with us. There being no further questions or business before the committee, if there's a motion to adjourn.
Chairman, so move to adjourn. Raymond
Okay.
Lopez.
Lopez. Alderman Lopez, so move. All those in favor?
Aye.
And all those opposed? In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. We will stand adjourned. Thank you so much. Before we leave, thank you so much for bearing with us doing this technical thing. And I certainly appreciate all of you being here. And everyone have a good and safe day. Thank you.
Good job, Chairman.
Thanks, Chair.
Great work,
Good job,
Chairman.
Chairman. Good job.
Thank you. You guys take care.
Thank
and
you,
be blessed.
Superintendent.
Thanks, Sue.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Thank you, future superintendent.